Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you are from. Also, what time is it? They said it was cursed. That's what the locals called it. A house no one dared to enter, a place cloaked in secrets, whispers, and an unshakable, eerie silence. From the outside, it looked ordinary, maybe even charming, if you didn't know any better. But the truth was much darker, far beyond the peeling paint and the cracked windows. No one knew for sure what happened inside that house, but people avoided the place like it was a plague. Don't go near it. Don't even think about it, they said. But when you live in a small town like Hollow Creek, curiosity grows in the most dangerous places, and sometimes you can't help but wonder what's inside. I'd been hearing stories about the house for as long as I could remember. Every whispered tale added to the mystery. It was like the house had a magnetic pull, especially for people like me. It wasn't that I wanted to test fate. I didn't. But there was something about it. Something I couldn't ignore. It had been empty for as long as anyone could remember. No one knew who had lived there. No one knew who had left. It was just empty. But there were signs, if you looked closely enough. A rusted mailbox that had been abandoned for years. Broken steps leading up to a porch that seemed to sink deeper into the earth each day. A garden that once flourished with vibrant colors, now twisted and choked by weeds. Their thorny fingers reaching out like claws. A place that seemed to want to be forgotten, but refused to let go. And then, the night I went there. It was just past midnight, when I found myself standing at the edge of the property, my heart pounding against my chest like it wanted to escape. I'd told myself that I wasn't going to do this, that I was smarter than this. But when I found myself alone, when the darkness swallowed everything around me, I couldn't help myself. Something inside me pushed me forward. The air was thick, damp with the smell of mildew and decay. My flashlight flickered weakly as I made my way toward the front door, the beam of light shaking like my hands. The wind whistled through the trees, the sound almost pleading. I could have sworn I heard something, someone sigh, but I brushed it off as the wind. The house creaked in protest, as though it were waking up from a long, deep slumber. I reached the door and stopped, my breath caught in my throat. Something was wrong. The door, it was open, just slightly, as though someone, or something, had been waiting for me. I didn't dare push it further. My instincts screamed at me to turn around, to run far, far away from the house. But I couldn't. Something kept me rooted in place. My fingers twitched, my mind racing with what to do next. I stepped forward, my foot landing softly on the broken porch, the wood groaning under my weight. Slowly, carefully, I pushed the door open, the rusted hinges screeching in protest. Inside was dark, so dark that even my flashlight couldn't break through. The air was thick with dust, and a musty odor made me gag. But there was something else, too. Something wrong. There were no sounds, nothing to suggest life had ever resided there. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That something, or someone, was watching me from the shadows. I took a step inside, my flashlight shaking in my grip. The floorboards creaked loudly, and I froze, holding my breath. The silence was deafening. The house had an almost oppressive energy. The walls felt as if they were closing in on me, pressing on my chest, suffocating me with every breath. And the darkness. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was alive, thick, and alive in ways I couldn't comprehend. It felt like it had been waiting for something, for someone. And that someone was me. I turned around, hoping to retreat, but I felt something tugging at my feet. I glanced down, my heart skipping a beat. The shadows on the floor seemed to move, inching closer to me, as if they were stretching toward my legs. I jerked back, stumbling. It was ridiculous, right? Shadows don't move. They can't. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw something, or someone, standing in the doorway across the room. A figure. Tall, thin, but somehow wrong. Its silhouette was sharp, too sharp, and as it stepped forward, my flashlight flickered, and I could see nothing but the outline of it. A vague shape against the backdrop of night. I couldn't make out its features, only its presence. My blood turned to ice. "Who's there?" I called, but my voice cracked as if the air itself refused to let me speak. No answer. It took a step forward, and then another slowly, like it was savoring the moment. The way it moved, it wasn't human, not in the way we understand it. It was an unnatural glide, like it was floating just above the ground, its body undulating, as if it were part of the shadows themselves. My heart pounded so loudly in my ears that I thought my skull might crack under the pressure. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like something was holding me in place, keeping me trapped in that moment, unable to escape. The thing, it reached out a hand. Long, thin fingers, too many of them. Like they didn't belong to a human body at all. The moment they brushed against the air, the room grew colder. I could feel the chill crawling over my skin, seeping into my bones, freezing me from the inside out. "Help," I whispered, but even I could barely hear the word, as if the house itself swallowed it whole. It stopped. For a second, there was nothing. And then, a voice, soft and distant, as though it was coming from deep within the walls themselves. "You shouldn't have come." My pulse raced. I spun on my heel. But the door was no longer where it had been. The porch, the yard, everything outside the house was gone. The doorframe was just an empty hole, leading to a black void. "Get out," I choked, backing away, but the figure didn't move. It was just watching me, its gaze heavy, unblinking, as if it knew I could never leave. The air grew heavier, suffocating, and for the first time, I felt the true weight of the curse that had been placed on the house. I wasn't alone. I wasn't just being watched. I was being trapped. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang, sending the entire house into a sudden, unnatural silence. My breath hitched, my mind spiraling into panic. And then a laugh. Loud, guttural, echoing from the very walls themselves. I was never meant to leave. The moment the door slammed shut, a wave of panic flooded my body, overwhelming every sense. I staggered backward, my chest tight as I struggled to draw in a breath. The laughter that reverberated through the walls had unsettled me. Unnatural, like it wasn't coming from any person at all. It was as if the house itself had laughed. A deep, hollow sound that seemed to come from every direction. I whipped around, my flashlight flickering, scanning the dark room, hoping for a sign of escape. But there was nothing. Only the oppressive silence. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I had been curious. I told myself that this was just an abandoned house, a relic of the past, untouched by time. It wasn't supposed to come alive. I wasn't supposed to feel like the walls were closing in on me, squeezing me until I couldn't breathe. I wasn't supposed to feel like there were eyes on me, unseen but so palpably close. I looked back toward the hallway, the space where the figure had appeared, but now it was gone. The house had swallowed it whole. There were no shadows, no figures looming in the corners, just a long, dark corridor stretching ahead, leading deeper into the unknown. The door was gone. That was the most terrifying part. I didn't know how I'd gotten inside, but I certainly didn't know how to get out. I turned my back to the hallway, my gaze shifting toward the room I was standing in, the once beautiful parlor now consumed by time. The curtains were long gone, shredded by years of neglect. The furniture, though covered in dust and mildew, was still intact, casting dark shapes against the dim light from my flashlight. The air was thick and musty, the scent of decay and something metallic hanging in the atmosphere. It wasn't just a house, it felt like a tomb, a place frozen in time, yet utterly aware of my presence. I stumbled through the room, my hand brushing against the dusty, chipped walls. I could feel something, beneath the surface, in the walls themselves. A subtle hum, like a quiet whisper I couldn't quite make out. My skin prickled. It was as if the house was alive, and it was trying to speak to me in ways I couldn't understand. Then, the whispers began. At first, it was soft, almost imperceptible. A faint murmur just beyond the range of comprehension. I stopped, my breath catching, straining to hear. It was like 1,000 voices whispering at once, but each one was too muffled to make sense of. My pulse quickened, and I hesitated before taking another step, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The whispers weren't coming from anywhere specific. They seemed to be coming from the walls, the floor, the very air itself. I turned my head sharply, expecting to see something. But there was nothing. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. For a moment, there was silence. Then, closer this time, almost right behind me. "Help me?" The voice was so soft that it barely registered. But it was there, clear as day. And it wasn't my own. I spun around, flashlight trembling in my hand, but I saw nothing. Nothing but the empty room, the same worn furniture, the same crooked walls. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That something was with me, watching me. Waiting, I backed up into the far corner, the shadows stretching long and ominous, the flashlight's beam flickering uncontrollably. My throat constricted. The house felt smaller now, like it was closing in on me from all sides. The whispers were growing louder, closer, like the walls themselves were pushing in on me. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. It was an unnatural cold that seeped into my skin, chilled my bones. The air felt heavy, thick with an almost tangible presence. And then, from somewhere deeper within the house, came a sound that froze me in place. A door creaked. I whipped around toward the hallway, my heart hammering in my chest. The sound came from deep within the house, further back, down a staircase that had been hidden in the corner of the room. I hadn't noticed it before. How could I have missed it? The door at the bottom of the stairs. It was opening, slowly. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My body was paralyzed. Rooted to the spot as the door groaned and swung wide, revealing only pitch darkness beyond. A draft of air rushed past me, carrying with it the faint scent of something old. Something decayed. Something wrong. The temperature in the room plummeted further, and I felt the hairs on my neck stand on end. The whispers grew more frantic, more insistent. "Help me. Help me." I didn't know if the voice was coming from the house or from my own mind anymore. It felt like they were all merging, becoming one with the walls, the air, the very foundation of this cursed place. I felt my feet move before I even realized it, my legs carrying me toward the stairs, against my better judgment, against every ounce of reason. The whispers urged me forward. The cold wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. I reached the bottom of the stairs, my eyes wide with fear, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The hallway before me was impossibly long, stretching further than it should have. The walls were cracked, the floorboards warped and uneven, as though time had forgotten this place. And then I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, a door stood ajar, but it wasn't the same as the one upstairs. This one had no handle, no sign of life. But it was open, and beyond it, in the faint light from my flashlight, I could see something, or someone, standing there, just inside the room. It was too dark to see clearly, but I knew something was waiting for me. A shiver ran through my body, and I took a step forward, the floorboards creaking loudly beneath my weight. The whispers reached a crescendo, the voices overlapping in a discordant chorus, all calling out at once. "Get out, get out." But I couldn't turn back. Not now. Something compelled me to keep going, to see what lay beyond the door, to uncover the truth of this place that had haunted the town for so long. I stepped closer, my breath catching in my throat, my eyes fixed on the doorway. The figure moved. It was a blur at first, but then it came into focus. A shape, tall and slender, with long limbs that seemed to bend and twist unnaturally. It stepped forward into the light, and for the first time I saw its face, or what remained of it. Its features were gaunt, hollowed out, as though it had been drained of life long ago. But its eyes, those eyes were wide open. Empty black holes staring into me, into my very soul. And then it spoke. "You shouldn't have come. You can never leave." I froze, unable to move, unable to speak. The door behind me slammed shut with such force that the entire house seemed to shake. The figure in the doorway stepped closer, its form twisting, distorting in the darkness. "Welcome home," it whispered. And then the whispers grew louder. The voices became frantic, panicked. But they weren't calling to me anymore. They were calling to each other. The whispers turned into screams. I could hear them, though they weren't words, not fully. They were fragmented pieces of voices, sharp and jagged, and each syllable twisted in the air like a weapon aimed at my sanity. The walls were shaking, the foundation of the house groaning under the strain of the unnatural sounds. I could feel the tremors vibrating through the floorboards, through my bones, as if the house itself was alive. My heart was pounding so loud, I thought it would burst through my chest. The figure in the doorway was no longer just standing there. It had moved closer, its long, gaunt form creeping forward in a slow, deliberate motion, each step accompanied by a sound like nails scraping on stone. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it, even though I wanted to. Its presence was overwhelming, suffocating. I took a step back, instinctively, but the space behind me was closing in. The walls, once so far apart, now felt like they were narrowing, like they were forcing me toward the figure in the doorway, forcing me to face whatever this thing was. It moved again, its limbs twisting, contorting, like it wasn't meant to move in the way any living thing should. My breath caught in my throat as the shadows around it seemed to grow darker, thicker, almost alive, trying to reach for me. "Leave. Now?" The voice was different this time. It wasn't the same voice that had whispered at me earlier. This one was guttural low, the words dripping with malice. It seemed to vibrate in my chest, a deep, rattling hum that reverberated through my bones. I stumbled back, my legs weak beneath me, but my body refused to obey. The oppressive air of the house seemed to smother me, and I couldn't breathe. The figure was closer now, so close that I could feel its cold presence seeping into the very air around me. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything close to human. It was something old, something ancient, and its eyes. Those eyes were what terrified me the most. They were hollow, black holes sunken deep into its face, but they glowed with an unsettling light, an unnatural gleam that seemed to burn into my soul. I felt like it was watching me, studying me, understanding me in ways I couldn't comprehend. And then it spoke again, its voice scraping against my mind like nails on a chalkboard. "You shouldn't have come here. You can't leave." I opened my mouth to scream, to beg for help, but no sound came out. It was like the house had stolen my voice, taken it with its cold, suffocating grip. The air was too thick. The darkness was too deep. There was no escape. I turned, desperate to run, but there was no way out. The hallway was now a narrow, suffocating tunnel. The walls closed in around me, moving, pulsating, as though they were breathing. The door I had seen earlier was now a mere memory, swallowed up by the encroaching shadows. The only light came from the figure, its eyes glowing like dying stars in the blackness. "Where will you go?" The figure crooned, its voice smooth but tainted with venom. "The house will never let you leave." I didn't understand. What did it mean? How could a house, a structure made of wood and stone, keep me here? I tried to run again, my legs heavy, my feet sluggish, as though the house was dragging me back with every step. I stumbled forward, my fingers brushing against the cold walls, trying to find something to hold on to break free. but it was no use. The air grew colder still, and I could feel it now. Something was changing. The temperature wasn't just dropping. It was shifting, becoming wrong. As though the very essence of the house was changing, warping. The shadows around me thickened, spreading like ink spilled across the floor. I turned, half expecting to see the figure looming over me, but it was gone. It had disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the sound of my shallow breath. But it wasn't over. No, not even close. I heard something. No, someone. Moving behind me, just beyond the reach of the light. It was a soft rustling sound like footsteps on carpet. But there was no carpet, no soft surface. The house was empty. The floor was cold, cracked stone. The sound shouldn't have been there, but it was. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice trembling. No answer. But then I felt it. A cold touch on the back of my neck, like fingers brushing lightly against my skin. I spun around, my flashlight flickering wildly. My pulse hammered in my ears as I scanned the empty space around me. There was nothing there. Nothing but the walls, the shadows, the oppressive silence. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to get out. I needed to leave this place, no matter what. I bolted forward, running blindly, my feet pounding against the floor. The whispers followed me, a constant, unsettling hum in the back of my mind. "Leave. Leave. You can never leave." The voices echoed in every corner, bouncing off the walls like 1,000 trapped souls, each one pulling me deeper into the house. I rounded the corner of the hallway, and there it was, another door. This one was different from the others. It wasn't old and decayed like the others. It was solid, sturdy, untouched by time. I reached for the doorknob, my hand shaking as I grasped it. The cold metal sent a jolt through my body like it was alive. My heart was racing as I turned the knob, the sound of the metal grinding against the lock sending a jarring shiver through my spine. The door opened slowly, the creaking sound deafening in the silence. And there, in the room beyond, was something I hadn't expected. A reflection. It wasn't my reflection, though. It couldn't be. I stood in the doorway frozen, staring at the dark figure that stared back at me from within the room. The figure in the reflection was exactly like me. Same height, same hair, same face. But its eyes were different. Hollow like the figure in the hallway. Black pits of emptiness. It grinned. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I couldn't. My feet were glued to the floor. My body frozen in place as I stared into the black void of its eyes. The reflection moved, and as it did, I felt it. My chest tightened, my breath becoming shallow. I was breathing too fast. The room seemed to close in on me. The reflection took a step toward me, and then another. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't obey. It was like I was trapped in that room, unable to escape the gaze of my own reflection. And then it spoke. "Get out of my house." It wasn't me anymore. The voice was deeper, harsher, distorted, like something was trying to crawl out of the reflection itself. I stepped back, my legs shaking, but the reflection kept coming. Its smile grew wider, the blackness of its eyes swallowing everything in sight, and then, in one swift motion, it lunged. And I screamed. The scream echoed in my ears, reverberating off the walls and bouncing through the hollow house like a shattered bell. It was my own voice. I knew that, but it didn't sound like mine. It was distorted, raw, and filled with terror. The reflection in the door. It wasn't me anymore. No, it couldn't be. My heart pounded as I stumbled backward, falling against the cold stone floor. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the tears from my eyes, the sharpness of the pain in my chest reminding me I was still alive, still here. Still in the house. I gasped for breath, scrambling to my feet as the reflection vanished from the door, disappearing into the shadows, leaving me alone in the room. The door was open now, wide enough for me to see into the dark hallway beyond. But I couldn't look away from the door, the doorway that had almost swallowed me whole. My thoughts raced, faster than I could catch them. That reflection. It wanted to be me. It wanted to take me. It wasn't just some twisted image of my face. It was something alive, something darker, something that had been waiting for me to get too close. It had lured me here, and now it was hunting me. The house was no longer just a haunted relic of the past. It was a living nightmare, and I was trapped in it. I turned away from the door, my flashlight barely managing to stay on as I moved toward the hallway. The whispering voices were there again, soft at first. Just a distant murmur like a chant. But as I moved closer to the end of the corridor, the voices grew louder. They felt almost hungry. I reached a door at the end of the hallway, its wood darkened by years of neglect, but strangely it was untouched. No dust, no decay. Something about it was different. I couldn't explain it, but the way it stood there, inviting me to open it, made my skin crawl. The whispers had become a single unified voice, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated in my chest. Come closer. The voice rumbled, low and threatening. Who's there? I asked, my voice shaking despite myself. I could feel it now. There was something else in the house, something watching me from the shadows. It was no longer just the figure. It was something worse, something older. I reached out, my hand trembling as it hovered over the door's handle. It was cold like ice. And the moment I touched it, a shock ran up my arm, as if the house itself had recognized me, had accepted me. I jerked back, heart racing, but something inside me urged me to open it. I had to know. I had to understand what was waiting behind this door. With a deep breath, I turned the handle, the door creaking as it slowly opened. What I saw was not what I expected. The room was vast, much larger than the narrow hallway had suggested. It was dim, with only the faintest trace of light trickling through a broken window at the far end, casting long, flickering shadows across the walls. The air was heavy with dust and the scent of mildew, but there was something else, something wrong. Something that made my stomach turn. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary basement. At least, that's what I thought. The walls were stone, weathered and worn by years of neglect. Old shelves lined the walls, stacked high with forgotten items, books, jars, and a myriad of objects I couldn't even begin to identify. But as my eyes traveled further into the room, my blood ran cold. There were shadows. Thick, twisting shapes that seemed to shift unnaturally. They were alive in a way the rest of the room wasn't. They moved like tendrils, like something organic that didn't belong. Some of them stretched toward me as if beckoning me forward. And there, in the center of the room, was something that made my skin crawl. A large, rusted metal door set into the stone floor. The door was covered in symbols I didn't recognize, but they had an eerie familiarity to them. They were etched deep into the metal, as if they had been carved with something far sharper than a simple tool. I felt the pull again, stronger now, as if the house itself was calling me toward the door. The whispers grew more frantic, the voice urging me to come closer, to open it. You have to see it. It's time. The voice growled. Time for you to understand. I took a tentative step forward, but as I did, something on the far side of the room caught my eye. A figure. It was small, hunched over, almost crouched on the floor. For a moment, I thought it might be a trick of the light. But no. As I stared, the figure shifted, and I could see it more clearly now. A man, but not like any man I had ever seen. He was thin, so thin that his skin looked like it might tear if touched. His bones jutted out sharply, and his hands were long, grotesque things, fingers too long, too thin, ending in sharp, yellow nails. His face was hollow, pale, with deep, empty eyes that stared directly at me. And then it moved, not toward me, but toward the metal door. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, stifling, and the sound of the figure's feet dragging along the floor was the only sound that filled the room. He shuffled slowly, but purposefully, as if he knew exactly where he was going, as if he had been here 1,000 times before. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed, my feet glued to the floor. The whispers in my head were louder now, each one growing more insistent. "Don't let him get there," the voice warned. "Don't let him open it." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as the figure reached the metal door. He stopped, standing in front of it, and for a moment, there was silence. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. He just stared at the door, his head tilting slightly as if waiting for something. And then, a terrible sound filled the air, a sound like metal scraping against stone. The door began to open, slowly, reluctantly. As it creaked open, a dark, oily substance began to spill out from the crack, seeping into the room like some kind of liquid shadow. The room grew colder, the air thickening with the stench of decay. I could see it now, the thing behind the door. It was enormous, a wraithing mass of shadows, shifting and twisting, with eyes everywhere, thousands of eyes, all staring at me. The shadows were alive, hungry, pulling themselves toward the light, toward me. I couldn't move. My body refused to obey, locked in place by the sheer terror of what I was seeing. The figure turned toward me, his hollow eyes meeting mine, and his lips cracked open into a smile. A grotesque, twisted smile that chilled me to the core. "It's too late," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the growling sound of the shadows that now filled the room. "You're part of it now." And then the darkness surged forward, and I felt myself being pulled toward it, consumed by the darkness that had no beginning, no end. I struggled, but my body wouldn't respond. The shadows swallowed me whole, and in that moment, I understood. I was never meant to leave this house. I was always meant to be part of it, forever. I woke to darkness. The sensation was jarring. One moment, I was engulfed by the shadows, being pulled into their infinite void. The next moment, I was here, floating in an emptiness that felt like the very fabric of reality had been torn apart. The weight of the world no longer existed. Time, space, even the concept of self seemed to vanish. My first instinct was to scream, to call out, but my voice was gone. There were no sounds here, no echoes, no vibrations. I couldn't even hear my own breath, just the suffocating, cold silence pressing in from all sides. Where was I? I blinked into the nothingness, but the void stretched infinitely in all directions, an ocean of blackness that swallowed everything. I didn't know whether I was standing or lying down. The ground beneath me didn't exist. I couldn't see, I couldn't feel. It was like being suspended in a dream, or perhaps a nightmare, where nothing made sense and everything was wrong. Something inside me screamed to move, to escape, but escape was impossible. There was no direction here, no up or down. I could only float, drift. The silence was oppressive. It was more than just the absence of sound. It was a presence in itself, a weight that pressed down on my mind. The longer I was here, the more I felt the pressure in my skull. It felt like my thoughts were being crushed under some invisible force. And then, there was a flicker, a movement. I turned instinctively, my heart skipping a beat. But there was nothing, just the vast, endless blackness. Was I seeing things? No, there it was again. A flicker. This time it was more distinct. A shape, a silhouette barely visible, standing just outside the edge of my perception. I couldn't make out any features, but the shape was unmistakable. It was a figure, tall, thin, shadowed, and it was watching me. I wanted to scream, but my throat was still dry, empty. Nothing would come out. My body trembled, the urge to run overwhelming. But there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The figure stepped closer, or perhaps it was me who was moving. I couldn't tell. The sense of time here was warped, distorted, like the very notion of movement was irrelevant. The figure came closer still, its presence sending a ripple of dread through the void. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. Its gaze was magnetic, pulling me in, consuming my every thought. Its form was dark, shifting in and out of focus. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more it seemed to disappear, only to reappear in another spot, closer, its shape contorting as though it wasn't bound by the same rules as the rest of reality. A voice spoke then, but it wasn't spoken aloud. It reverberated inside my skull, a low, guttural whisper. "You're not alone." The words didn't make sense, yet they felt familiar, like a memory from long ago. The figure's form flickered again, and then it moved toward me, its presence now undeniable. It wasn't just watching anymore. It was closing the distance, its shadowy tendrils reaching out toward me. I backed away, my feet moving though I didn't know where to go. There was nowhere to go, no space to escape. I felt the coldness of its presence before I saw it. The darkness that seemed to emanate from it, creeping into my very skin, chilling me to the core. My body screamed in protest, but the void swallowed the sound, just as it swallowed everything else. The figure stopped just in front of me. It wasn't close enough to touch, but it didn't need to be. The space between us was filled with an energy that vibrated with an intensity I couldn't comprehend. Its form was less of a physical entity now and more of an idea, an embodiment of something beyond the human understanding. A thing that was neither alive nor dead. Its eyes, or what passed for eyes, were black, infinite, but within them there was something. A flicker. A memory. It knows me. Suddenly images flashed across my mind, quick, fleeting. A room, a door, a basement. But more than that, there was a sense of familiarity, of inevitability. The more I tried to focus on these images, the faster they slipped away, like water through my fingers. But one image remained. The metal door, the door I had seen in the basement, the door that I had tried so desperately to avoid. The figure's gaze seemed to intensify, and the void around us rippled, distorting like a mirage. The emptiness began to fracture, bits of it dissolving into pieces, like cracks in a shattered glass pane. The broken pieces splintered, floating away into the endless black, and then, in the distance, I saw it. The door, the metal door. It was there, beyond the figure, beyond the nothingness. I knew I had to go toward it. There was no choice now. The figure had shown me this door, and now it was my only way out. But as I moved toward it, I felt a presence, no more than that. I felt an overwhelming force, a hunger, coming from behind me. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its pull, its energy latching onto me, dragging me back toward it. A voice, deeper now, darker than before, called out from the depths of the void. "You can never escape." I didn't look back. I couldn't. The door was within reach now. I could feel it. It was cold metal against my fingertips. The symbols etched into it were not just decoration. They were warnings. Warnings I didn't understand. But I had no choice. I opened it. What lay beyond was not what I expected. I stepped through, and immediately, the sensation of weight returned. Gravity, space, light, it all came crashing back. I was no longer in the void. I was in a room, but it was not the basement. It wasn't anywhere I recognized. The room was vast, endless. I couldn't see where the walls ended. They stretched upward far beyond my sight. The air was thick with dust, and the floor beneath me creaked as if it hadn't borne weight in centuries. I had stepped into something ancient, something wrong. The shadows here were alive. They twisted and curled in the corners, as though they were waiting, watching. The floor was covered in something too. Old symbols, faded with age, but still unmistakable. The same marks that had been on the door. And in the center of the room, there was something. A pedestal. Atop it, an object. A book. But this was no ordinary book. It was bound in something that resembled leather, but it was darker, wetter, as though it had been soaked in ink, or something far worse. The pages inside were barely visible, as if the words themselves were fading from existence. I could feel the book's pull, its weight, its gravity. Something about it felt alive. The figure appeared behind me, just outside my peripheral vision. I didn't need to turn around to know it was there. I could feel its presence, like a shadow falling over me, suffocating me. "You must understand," it whispered. "You were always meant to open the door." The book was alive. I didn't understand it, but I could feel it. The moment I stepped closer to the pedestal, the air in the room seemed to thicken, as though something was stirring, awakening from a long, deep slumber. I reached out, my fingers trembling, unable to fight the pull. There was something about the book, an undeniable force, as though it had been waiting for me to find it. As I placed my hand upon it, the leather cover was cold, slick beneath my touch. But it wasn't just cold. It felt like it was watching me, like it was aware of my every move, my every thought. The edges of the pages, faintly visible through the cracked cover, seemed to shift and writhe, just beyond my understanding. The symbols on the pages danced in and out of focus, but they were too complex, too foreign for me to grasp. A faint whisper, like the rustling of old leaves, reached my ears. The words were unrecognizable, the language ancient and guttural. They seemed to call to me, urging me to open the book. For a moment, I hesitated. The figure behind me was silent, but its presence was suffocating. I could feel its eyes boring into my back, but I could not bring myself to look at it. I couldn't break my gaze from the book. Something was pulling me in. I couldn't stop myself. My fingers trembled as I slowly began to lift the cover. The instant I did, the room shifted. The shadows on the walls seemed to stretch toward me, swirling like smoke, and the air grew colder, much colder. My breath came in shallow gasps, the temperature plunging rapidly. But the warmth of the book in my hands was the only thing that seemed to remain unchanged. I could feel the presence of something ancient, something old, unfurling within the pages. As I flipped through the first few, the ink on the pages was almost alive, dancing, moving, as if it were drawn from the blood of the earth itself. The words were indecipherable, but as I moved deeper, something changed. The symbols morphed, shifting and rearranging before my very eyes. They became familiar. Too familiar. They were names. But not names I recognized. The names were my names. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but no. There it was. The letters swirled into a familiar shape, one I had seen countless times before. The name my mother had whispered to me when I was a child. The name I had known since the moment I could remember myself. But then, more names followed. Names that shouldn't be there. My mind screamed in protest as I saw them. Names of people who had long since passed. Names of places that didn't exist. Names I had never heard of. And yet they were all connected. They had been bound together by this book, this cursed book, and now I was bound to them as well. The air grew heavy. The whispers around me were louder now, almost deafening. Crashing against my skull, the figure behind me moved. Slowly, silently, as though it was waiting for something. Waiting for me to remember. I flipped through the pages more rapidly now. The names stretching on, like a never-ending chain. The book seemed to call out to me, urging me to read faster, to reach the end. But as I did, my fingers began to grow numb. The more I turned the pages, the colder my skin became. My breath turned to fog in the air, the temperature plummeting to a point where I could no longer feel my fingertips. And then, I found it. At the very last page of the book, there was a name. My name. But this one was different. It was scrawled in a hand that seemed too large, too distorted for any human to have written. It had been scratched into the page, as though it had been carved with some sharp, jagged object. My name. And beneath it, beneath the name, was something darker, an inscription that chilled me to the bone. This is the name you will never forget. This is the name that will bind you forever. A sudden wave of dizziness washed over me. The room spun, the shadows closing in around me. The whispers were deafening now, all around me. each voice blending together until it was one massive roar in my ears. I staggered backward, clutching the book to my chest as if it could protect me, as if it could shield me from whatever force was awakening inside me. The figure's presence was now unmistakable. It was right behind me, but I refused to turn around. I couldn't face it. I couldn't look. A voice, deep and familiar, rumbled from behind me. "It's too late." And that's when I realized. The figure, it wasn't just watching me. It was me. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. I wasn't just here because of some twisted fate. This wasn't just a haunted house or some forgotten nightmare. This was something much worse. The figure, the voices, the house, they were all a part of me. I had always been connected to this place, to the book. It wasn't some ancient curse or some supernatural force that had drawn me here. I had always been bound to this house, this darkness, from the very beginning. The book had revealed it to me, but I had known it all along. I dropped the book. The instant it hit the ground, the world seemed to break. The shadows that had once danced calmly across the walls suddenly twisted, becoming something darker, more malevolent. The room itself seemed to breathe. The walls pulsed with a rhythmic, unnatural energy. The whispers reached a fever pitch. I covered my ears, but it did no good. The sound filled my entire mind, deafening me, suffocating me. "It's time." The voice whispered again, only now it wasn't just one voice. It was all of them, hundreds, thousands, all blending together. "Time to remember who you really are." My eyes widened as I finally turned toward the figure. But it wasn't just the figure anymore. It wasn't just me standing there. No. What I saw now was something else. The figure was no longer just a shadow. It was shifting. It was changing, growing, as though it was absorbing everything around it. It became taller, its limbs lengthening, twisting unnaturally, like some ancient creature emerging from the depths of time. And then, the final truth crashed down on me. The figure wasn't just me. It was the thing I had always been meant to become. The house wasn't a place. It wasn't just a prison. It was my legacy. The room spun around me as the figure twisted and writhed, reshaping itself into something monstrous. It was no longer merely a shadow, nor just a reflection of me. It had taken on a life of its own. It was growing before my eyes, as though the very air in the room was feeding it, nurturing it. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows pressing harder, suffocating the space. I staggered back, my heart hammering in my chest, but my legs refused to obey. It was as if the room itself had become a labyrinth, the walls alive, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. I tried to move, to run, but my body was betraying me. My skin felt cold, like I was sinking into the depths of some forgotten abyss. And then, in a flash of horrifying realization, I understood. I had never been meant to escape. This place had always been mine. This was where I belonged. The figure, my reflection, my twisted doppelganger, now towered over me. Its limbs stretched unnaturally long, reaching down like elongated fingers, and the darkness around it seemed to swallow the light, turning everything a deep, oily black. It was me, but it wasn't. There was nothing human left in its form. It was something older, something far more ancient, a reflection of what I could have become if I had given in to the house's call long ago. The whispers had been warnings, not just from the walls, but from the very air I breathed. The house had been waiting for me to come home, waiting for me to take my place in its forgotten depths. The figure's hollow eyes met mine, but it wasn't the same as before. The vacant pits were now filled with something else, something worse. They were burning now, glowing with a sickly, greenish hue, as if they had become windows to another world, a place that existed beyond time, beyond reason. It smiled. Or at least, I think it did. The grin stretched too wide, too far, like its face wasn't even capable of holding that expression. Its teeth were jagged, uneven, and impossibly sharp. But the smile, if you could call it that, was filled with something else. Knowledge. I tried to back away again, but the air in the room had thickened, suffocating me. Every step I took, the shadows seemed to shift with me, pressing closer, blocking my path, until I could go no further. The figure spoke, but the voice wasn't one I recognized. "You were always meant to find me," it said, its words slow, deliberate, each one dripping with a deep, ancient hunger. "This house was never abandoned, child. It was always waiting for you. Waiting for your return." I stumbled, falling back onto the ground, my mind spinning as the meaning of its words began to sink in. Return. I hadn't been here before. I couldn't have. The house was a mystery to me. The town, Hollow Creek, had always been a place of rumors and legends, a place I'd been warned about since I was a child. I never lived here. I never knew its dark history, its hidden secrets. And yet a memory flashed, a brief flicker of something buried deep within me, something I had long forgotten. A name, my real name. Not the one I had known for as long as I could remember, but the name I had left behind. The name that belonged to someone else. Someone who had once lived here, in this house. Someone who had been tied to this place in a way I could never have imagined. A figure moved in the darkness behind me. But this time, it wasn't just the twisted creature in front of me. It was a face, a woman. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, but familiar, too familiar. The same deep-set eyes, the same face I'd seen in a reflection years ago, only twisted and broken now, distorted by time and agony. It was the face of someone who had long since been forgotten. It was my mother. "No," I whispered, as the truth crashed down on me like a heavy weight. This isn't possible. But it was. The woman, my mother, stood silently behind me, her eyes hollow, but filled with an unmistakable pain. She didn't speak, but I could feel her presence. Just as I had felt the figures, just as I had felt the house's unrelenting grip on me. She was a part of it, a part of this as much as I was. "You were always mine." The figure whispered again, its voice now layered with something darker. "You were never meant to escape this place. You were born for this." I looked down at the book still lying on the pedestal, its pages now flipping wildly, as though it had a mind of its own. The names were shifting, rearranging, and then, one by one, they stopped. The page came to rest, the words now burning brightly under my eyes. I couldn't move. My name. But this time, it wasn't just my name. It was the name of the house that had claimed my bloodline, passed down through generations, waiting for me to come home to take my rightful place. "The house needs you." The figure continued, its voice now all-encompassing, wrapping around me like a vice. "It needs you to complete what was started, to finish the cycle." The room was spinning now, the walls warping as the book's words echoed in my mind. The names, my name, all blending together, until it was impossible to tell where the house ended and I began. I was being consumed by it, by the house, by its past, by the bloodline that had once given me life, but now only sought to drag me into the darkness that had always existed here. "You will never leave," the figure said softly, its voice now almost affectionate, like a parent speaking to a child. "This house is you, and you are it. Your soul has been bound here since the beginning of time. You belong to it, just like she did." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to do anything but stay in this cursed place, but it was useless. The house had already begun its work. It was pulling me in, deeper and deeper, and I could feel myself fading. My body, my mind, my very soul, all becoming one with the house, becoming one with the darkness. I closed my eyes, but the images didn't stop. They swirled before me. The house, the book, the names, all of them calling to me, pulling me into an endless cycle that could never be broken. And then, in the deepest corners of my mind, a whisper, "Welcome home." And that was when I realized, with horrifying clarity, that there was no escaping the house. There never had been. The whisper echoed in my mind like a drumbeat, vibrating through every inch of my being, pulling me further into the abyss. Welcome home. The words were not comforting. No. They were chains, cold and unyielding, wrapping themselves around my heart, my soul. There was no escaping them. The figure, the distorted version of myself, was still there, looming over me like a predator circling its prey. Tilted its head, a grotesque grin twisting its features, its eyes glowing with that sickly, greenish light. Every movement it made felt deliberate, too controlled, as though it were waiting for me to accept it, to finally accept what I had become. The name in the book, the name that bound me to this place, it was my legacy, my fate. The walls around me seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, like the very house itself was alive, feeding off my fear, my confusion. It was hungry. I could feel its hunger, a primal need that had been growing for generations, stretching back to the moment the first soul had entered this cursed place. And now, it was my turn. You've always belonged to us. The figure whispered, its voice now a low, rattling sound that filled the entire room. Your blood, your name, your soul. It has always been tied to this house. You were never meant to escape. You were meant to return. I stumbled back, my feet scrambling for purchase against the cold, uneven floor. The more I tried to move, the more the house seemed to push against me, suffocating me, until I felt like I couldn't breathe, like I couldn't think. The air was thick, dense, almost viscous, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch out, reaching for me with hungry tendrils, pulling me back toward the center of the room. I looked at the book, lying forgotten on the pedestal. It seemed to glow faintly, the ink on the pages writhing and twisting, as if the words themselves were alive, waiting for me to read them. The names were still there, still mine, and I realized, too late, that they were not just written on the pages. They were written on the house. On me. They were my past, my ancestors, and now they were my future. The figure stepped closer, its movement so slow that it seemed to distort the very air around it. It towered over me, its shadow falling over me like a dark cloud. I could feel its presence pressing against my chest, suffocating me, and I wanted to scream. But no sound escaped my lips. It reached out a hand, its long, twisted fingers brushing against my skin. The touch was ice cold, sending a jolt of terror through me. But it wasn't just terror. It was something more. Something deeper. It was recognition. The figure's touch wasn't just cold. It was familiar. You know me, it said, its voice echoing in my mind. You've always known me. I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to acknowledge it, but the truth began to sink in, slowly, painfully. The figure wasn't some twisted version of myself. No, it was me. It had always been me, a part of me that had been buried deep in the shadows, forgotten by time. It was the darkness that had always lived inside of me, the darkness that had never been allowed to see the light. I could see it now, the way the house had shaped me, the way it had manipulated me from the very beginning. It wasn't just a house. It was a prison, and I had always been its prisoner. My ancestors had been its prisoners before me. Their names, etched into the pages of the book, were nothing more than echoes of a never-ending cycle, a cycle of death and rebirth, of darkness and light. The house had always waited for me, waited for my return. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, this can't be real. But it was. The figure, me, smiled again, its teeth gleaming in the dim light. You cannot deny it. It's always been in you. The blood, the name, the darkness. The house knows. The house has always known. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the figure, trying to block out the truth that was crashing down on me. But it was useless. The house had already claimed me. It was too late. It had always been too late. The air around me thickened, and the whispers grew louder. They were no longer just whispers. They were voices, voices that had been silenced for centuries, voices of those who had come before me, my ancestors. Their voices echoed in my mind, telling me things I didn't want to hear. Their stories, their pain, their longing. All of it was woven into the very fabric of the house. "You will never leave," the figure said, its voice no longer a whisper, but a command. "This is your place. This is where you belong. Forever." I felt the weight of its words in my chest, a crushing pressure that threatened to break me. It wasn't just the figure, or the house, or the whispers. It was the truth. The truth that I had always been a part of this place. The truth that this house, with all its dark secrets, had been waiting for me. And now there was no escape. The figure reached out again, its fingers brushing my face, its cold touch sending a chill down my spine. "You are the next," it whispered, its voice full of dark satisfaction. "The next to carry the name. The next to carry the house." I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept it. But as I looked into the figure's eyes, I knew the truth. I was the next in a long line of prisoners, bound to the house, destined to carry on its legacy. There was no way out. There never had been. The house had already claimed me, and now I was just another piece in its never-ending puzzle. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing tighter, the shadows growing longer. I could feel the house inside me now, its power seeping into my blood, into my bones. I was becoming part of it, just as my ancestors had. The darkness was mine. It had always been mine. And then I heard it. A sound. A faint, distant sound like a door creaking open. The door. The one that had been locked for so long. The door that had been waiting for me to open it. And now I had. Now, I was ready to step into the unknown. To embrace my true self. To become one with the house. I didn't know what lay beyond the door. I didn't know if there was anything at all. But I knew one thing. I could never go back. The sound of the door creaking echoed in the silence, slicing through the thick, suffocating air of the room. For a moment, I hesitated. My feet rooted to the cold, stone floor, my heart pounding with the deafening realization of what was happening. The figure behind me, the twisted reflection of myself, smiled again. A grin that spread unnaturally across its face, stretching too wide, too painfully. It tilted its head, watching me with those hollow, burning eyes, as though waiting for me to make my decision, as though waiting for me to accept my fate. I couldn't go back. It wasn't a choice anymore. It never had been. I was bound to this place, bound to the house, the cycle that had trapped every soul before me. My name had always been written in the book, etched into the walls, marked in blood long before I was born. The door had been waiting for me to open it, to step through, to become one with it. I turned toward the door, my legs moving of their own accord, my hands trembling as I reached for the handle. The metal was cold to the touch, slick with condensation, but I didn't flinch. There was no turning back now. The house had already consumed me. I had been a prisoner of its shadows, its whispers, for as long as I could remember. It was only a matter of time before I became the next piece of its twisted legacy. The door opened slowly, the hinges groaning under the weight of centuries. I didn't know what lay beyond it, but the air that rushed through the crack, the cold, damp air, felt different. It felt like a place far removed from anything I could have imagined. I stepped through, and the world seemed to shift around me. It was no longer the house, the stone walls, the dark corridors, the suffocating shadows that had once been my prison. No, this was something else. Something older, deeper. A vast, dark expanse stretched out before me, an endless void that seemed to stretch on forever. It was a place where time didn't exist, where the past and future collided in a sickening twist of space and energy. The air here was thicker, heavier, but there was no sound, no movement. It was as if the world had stopped. The silence was deafening. I tried to take a step, but the ground beneath me was unsteady, as if the floor itself was shifting, moving like the water's surface, rippling with an unseen force. The darkness pressed against me from all sides, but I felt no fear. The terror had long since faded. All that remained was the knowing, the acceptance, the understanding that I was no longer a person. I was something else, something born of this place. "You've come home." The figure's voice echoed from behind me, its words reverberating through the void. The shadows in the distance seemed to grow darker, as if responding to the call of its voice, as if the very darkness itself was answering. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. There was nothing left to turn to. The floor beneath me cracked open, and I could feel the heat of something deep below. It was a pull, a magnetic force that drew me in, sinking deeper into the abyss. The darkness was no longer just around me. It was inside me, wrapping itself around my bones, my heart. It was as though I had become part of it, a part of the void itself. I moved forward, and with each step, the shadows seemed to respond, stretching toward me, swirling around my feet. The walls that had once enclosed me in the house were now gone, replaced by this vast, eternal nothingness. "The house has always been with you," the figure's voice repeated, but this time it wasn't just one voice. It was many, hundreds, thousands, all echoing in unison, filling the void with their weight, their presence. "You are its heart now. You are its soul." The ground beneath me shifted again, and I stumbled, my body losing its balance. For the first time, I felt the weight of the void pressing against me. But there was no fear, only an undeniable sense of purpose. "You will be the next keeper." The voice continued, growing louder, more intense, as if it were everywhere, surrounding me. "You will carry the house's legacy, its name, and it will never end. Not until the last soul has passed through its doors." The words filled me, coursing through my veins like an ancient fire, awakening something deep within me, something I had always known, but had been too terrified to face. The truth was undeniable now. The house had always been a part of me, and I had always been a part of it. I stumbled forward, my body moving against its will, my mind clouded by the darkness. The names in the book? The endless pages had been mine all along. My ancestors' blood was in me. Their sins, their mistakes, were written into my very soul. And now, it was my turn to carry on the legacy. I had no choice. There was no escaping it. The house had claimed me, and I had embraced it. The darkness seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions, but I could feel something pulling me forward, guiding me as if the very essence of the house was moving within me. And then, ahead of me, I saw it. A door. Much like the one I had just passed through, but this one was different. This one was far older, its wood cracked and weathered by centuries of neglect. The handle was gold, tarnished and worn, but still glowing faintly with the same sickly light that had been in the figure's eyes. The door beckoned to me, and I could feel the weight of it, the pull of it, drawing me closer. As I reached out to touch the handle, I felt the breath of my ancestors on the wind, the echoes of their voices whispering my name. It was time. I opened the door. Beyond it, there was nothing, no light, no sound, only darkness. And then a voice, my own voice, spoke, echoing in the void. "It's time to begin." And just like that, I knew. The house had claimed me. It had always been mine, and now I would become part of it, an eternal keeper of its twisted, forgotten name. The door creaked open, and as it did, the infinite void beyond it seemed to swallow everything in sight. The darkness was no longer just a color or a presence. It was a force, a living, breathing entity that pulsed with a power older than time itself. I stepped into it, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my new existence. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the world around me seemed to collapse. The ground beneath me shattered, pieces of the world scattering in every direction, vanishing into the endless dark. I couldn't see anything, couldn't feel anything, There was only the sensation of falling, endless and all-consuming. But it wasn't a fall. It was something else. Something more. The air around me grew thick, suffocating, pressing in from all sides. My lungs screamed for breath, but none came. The weight of the house, of its legacy, pressed down on me, wrapping itself around my chest, squeezing out every last ounce of life, until there was nothing left but the realization of what I had become. I was the house now. I was its keeper. The voice echoed in my mind again. The familiar voice. The voice that had whispered to me since the moment I had stepped through the first door, since the moment I had opened the book and seen my name written on its pages. It is time, keeper. The voice was soft now, almost soothing, as if it were a lullaby meant to cradle me into the dark. Time to begin your work. The work. I didn't need to ask what that meant. The house had always had a purpose, and now I was its agent. The souls that had passed through its doors, the ones who had been lost to its endless corridors, would be my responsibility now. Their voices, their whispers, would be mine to keep, mine to guard. I could feel it, a stirring deep within my bones, a connection. The house had lived within me all this time, and now it had awakened in full. Every step I had taken, every door I had opened, every choice I had made, it had all led to this moment, and there was no turning back. The darkness around me began to shift, pulling itself together, coalescing into shapes. Figures. I could feel their eyes on me, 1,000 souls, all waiting for me to claim them, to guide them through the door that I had once crossed. They were mine now. The air crackled with energy as the souls, faint, translucent but still alive, gathered around me. Their faces were pale, twisted with agony, their eyes empty, lost. They were the remnants of the past, the echoes of those who had entered the house before me, never to leave. And now they would remain with me. Forever. I reached out my hand, and the darkness responded, curling around my fingers like smoke. It was alive in ways I had never understood before. It was me, and I was it. We were one. A vision bloomed in my mind. The house. I saw it, its endless halls, its infinite rooms, stretching across time and space, stretching across eternity. I saw the doors, the windows, the corners where the shadows were thickest, where the air was thick with whispers. I saw the souls, wandering, lost, forgotten, waiting for me to guide them. And then, the figure appeared again, standing at the center of the room. It was no longer just a shadow of me. It was me, my face, my form, but different. Transformed. You've come to understand now. The figure said, its voice deep, resonating with the weight of the house. It wasn't a person anymore. It wasn't even a figure. It was the house, living and breathing, a part of me. You were always the next in line, the next keeper. Now, the house will live through you. It was the truth. I was the keeper now. I was the house's heartbeat, its soul. I had taken my place in the cycle. My ancestors had done it before me, and now I would continue it. I reached out, feeling the power within me grow. It surged through my veins, pushing out the remnants of my old self, the human self. It was a strange, bitter feeling, as though I was losing something, but I couldn't quite remember what. The voices of the souls began to hum around me, a soft chant at first, but then louder. Louder, they became a cacophony, filling my ears, drowning me in their cries. I was their keeper now. The darkness surged around me, closing in, filling every inch of the space. The walls of the house seemed to close in too, their outlines appearing and disappearing as the void warped and shifted. The cycle begins anew. The figure said, its voice a low, echoing murmur. You will guide them. You will ensure they never leave. They will always come back. Always. The house's legacy will live on through you. I nodded, though I couldn't say the words. The weight of the responsibility, of this role I had assumed, was heavy, but there was no escaping it. I was the house. The house was me, and together we would remain. For eternity. I stepped forward, and as I did, the shadows parted. Before me stood another door. This one was different, older, its frame cracked and worn by the passage of time. But it was still intact, still functional. "You know what must be done," the figure said, though its voice seemed distant now, as if fading away. "Guard them. Welcome them home." I reached for the door, and as my fingers touched the handle, the weight of the house crashed down on me once more. The darkness swelled, enveloping me entirely. The house's heartbeat pulsed through me, faster, harder, until it felt as though the very foundations of reality were shaking. I opened the door. Beyond it was another world, another endless void. But this time, I was ready. The cycle would never end. Not for me. Not for the house. And in that moment, I understood fully. I was both the keeper and the prisoner, and I would be both forever. The door creaked open, the air behind it thick with an energy I couldn't explain. As I stepped through, I was greeted by a scene unlike any I had ever known, yet it was oddly familiar. It was another hallway, but this one felt different. The walls stretched impossibly high, their surfaces slick with darkness, and the shadows themselves seemed to dance around me, whispering, beckoning me forward. I was no longer sure where I was or even when I was. Time had no meaning here. The house, the endless cycle, had swallowed everything I had once known, and now it had become my reality. I was the keeper. I was the house. The souls, their voices now a steady hum in my mind, moved around me, drawn to the pulse of the house's presence, just as I had been. Their forms flickered and distorted like shadows, lost and wandering, waiting to be guided. I could feel their energy, their desperation, as if they were still searching for an escape, still clinging to the hope that there was a way out. But there was no escape. "Welcome home," I whispered, my voice barely audible, but it carried, reverberating off the walls, carrying with it a weight that pressed against my chest. The words felt hollow, but they were the only words I knew. It was what I had been trained to say. It was what the house had made me into. I wasn't me anymore. Not truly. I was a vessel, a guide, a keeper of the lost. The door behind me slammed shut with a resounding bang, its sound echoing down the endless hallway. The walls shifted, the floorboards creaking beneath me, as if the house was waking up, preparing for the next chapter in its twisted story. I could feel its power, its need for me to carry out my duty, its pull on every ounce of my being. It was a hunger, the hunger of a creature that fed on the souls of the lost, those who had wandered in and never found their way out. But there was something else, too, something I hadn't felt before, a faint flicker of resistance. I stopped, my heart, if I could still call it a heart, skipping a beat. I turned to look back down the hallway, my senses on edge. For the first time since I had crossed into this place, I felt unsettled. The shadows were no longer silent, no longer passive. They were moving. They were alive, swirling around me, growing restless. And then I heard it, a whisper, faint at first, but growing louder, more distinct with each passing second. It wasn't the familiar voices of the lost souls. It wasn't the call of the house. It was something different. I stepped back, my hand instinctively reaching for the walls, but they were shifting, changing beneath my touch. The darkness seemed to swirl, pulling away from me, as if recoiling from something unseen. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. "You've gone too far." I froze. The words were clear now, cutting through the thick air like a blade. "You've lost yourself." It was a voice, my voice, but twisted, distorted by something darker, something ancient. I felt it then. The presence, something that had been watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to realize the truth. I wasn't alone. I wasn't just the keeper of the house. I wasn't just a prisoner of its endless cycle. There was something else here, something that had been lying in wait. A force older than the house itself, something that had never fully been a part of the cycle. and it was watching me now. The shadows recoiled again, but this time, I saw something else. A figure. A shape, faint but unmistakable, standing at the end of the hallway. The figure was tall and imposing, its form cloaked in darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me. It wasn't a human shape, but it wasn't a shadow either. It was something else. Something that had never been part of the house's design. It felt alien to the house. I tried to move, but my feet wouldn't obey. I felt rooted to the spot, held in place by an invisible force. The figure began to move toward me, its presence filling the hallway, suffocating the very air around me. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice whispered again, but this time, it wasn't just in my head. The words echoed through the walls, vibrating the very foundations of the house. Who was it? The figure stepped closer, and I could feel the air around me growing colder. The temperature dropping, until the chill seemed to bite into my skin. The shadows thickened, pressing against me, but the figure moved through them effortlessly, as if the darkness parted in reverence to it. "This is not your domain," the voice continued, its tone no longer a whisper, but a command. It echoed through every part of me. "You are a servant, not a master. The house does not belong to you." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't the house speaking. This wasn't the darkness speaking. This was something else. Something that had been here before the house was even built. The figure came closer, its form becoming clearer. A shape. Tall. Thin. Its face was indistinct. Shadowed, its features shifting like smoke, but the eyes were solid. Unblinking. And they were cold. They seemed to burn through me. Through the very core of my being. "The house has always been a prison," it said, its voice low and resonating in my chest, like thunder trapped in the walls. "And you?" It pointed at me, its finger extending with unnatural precision. "You are the key to its opening." The weight of its words hit me like a physical blow. I was the key. I had been so focused on the idea that I was the keeper of the house, the one who guided the lost souls through its corridors, that I hadn't stopped to consider the true nature of my role. I wasn't just the keeper. I was the prisoner. I was the one who kept the house's dark secret locked away, keeping the souls trapped in an endless loop of despair and fear. But I was also the one who had the power to release them. I had always had the power to end this. The realization hit me with the force of a lightning strike. The door, the key, the shadows. It wasn't just about the house. It was about what I had become. The house had consumed me, but I had also become something more than it had intended. I had been made its keeper, but I could be its end too. The figure stepped forward again, its presence overwhelming, its eyes boring into me with an intensity I couldn't escape. It was trying to break me, to make me question everything I had become. And for a moment I felt it. The hesitation, the fear, the doubt. But then I remembered. I had never been the house's servant. I was never meant to be. The figure's words cut off, its eyes widening in disbelief, and for the first time, I felt the darkness recede from me. The shadows around me, no longer threatening, began to disperse, retreating into the corners of the room. I reached out, my hands steady now, my mind clear. I had always been the key. I had always had the power to break free, and I would. The figure screamed, its form dissolving into smoke and shadow as I stepped forward, pushing open a door I had never known existed, a door that had always been hidden from me. Beyond it lay a world of light, a world where the shadows couldn't reach. And the cycle, it would end with me. The door creaked open. But the world beyond it was unlike anything I had ever seen. The very air felt alive, pulsing with a soft, radiant glow. The shadows, those once oppressive, suffocating forces that had been my constant companions, faded into nothing, dissipating like smoke in the wind. The room was vast, its dimensions stretching far beyond what the eye could comprehend. The walls were bathed in an ethereal light, shimmering in hues that shifted between soft blues, purples, and golds. There was no ceiling here, no floor, just endless space, as though I had crossed into another realm entirely, one untouched by the darkness that had ruled my existence for so long. For the first time, I felt free. But even in this place, I could feel it. The house, the entity that had consumed me, still clung to me like a shadow. It was inside me, its presence coiled around my soul, ready to claim me once again. It hadn't let go. It never let go. And yet, for the first time, I didn't feel like its servant. I felt like its opposite, its liberator. The dark figure that had tried to crush me, that had tried to remind me of my place, had no power here. This was a place beyond the house, beyond its walls, beyond its endless cycle. I was beyond it now. The room seemed to respond to my thoughts, shifting gently, like a ripple on the surface of a still pond. It acknowledged me. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. The realization came as naturally as breathing. I wasn't meant to continue the cycle. I wasn't meant to be its keeper. The souls, the house, they had been trapped, just like I had been. And if I was the key, then I could be the one to break it. I could be the one to end the endless loop. The weight of the house, its dark, suffocating influence pressed against me, but this time I had the strength to resist. The shadows that clung to my soul trembled as I reached out with my mind, my will, and began to unravel them. It wasn't easy. Nothing that had been bound for so long could be undone easily. But I could feel the strands of the house's power beginning to loosen. With each passing second, the grip it had on me grew weaker. And as I pulled on those dark threads, I could feel something else too. The souls. They were watching, waiting, their presence flickering like 1,000 faint stars in the distance. They were lost, trapped within the cycle of the house, forever looping through its halls, their cries fading into the shadows. But I could feel them now, their longing, their pain, their desire for release. And I knew, with absolute clarity, that they had never been meant to suffer forever. They hadn't been brought to the house to be trapped. They had been misguided, led astray by the same dark force that had consumed me. I wasn't just their keeper anymore. I was their redeemer. The room shifted again, the light brightening as the energy of the souls began to rise, spiraling upward toward me. They were drawn to my presence, to my purpose. The light around me pulsed with their collective energy, and the shadows, the remnants of the house, began to retreat. And in that moment, I understood. The house had always been a prison, yes. But it had also been a test to see if the bloodline could break the cycle. A test to see if someone could stand against the darkness and claim their own freedom, not just for themselves, but for the lost souls too. I was the one who had passed that test. I was the one who had broken free. The door behind me slammed shut, but I no longer needed it. I no longer needed the house. I turned, facing the rising energy of the souls, and I stretched out my arms, and the house began to break. The shadows that had once been so oppressive, so all-encompassing, began to fade, dissolving into nothingness. The walls, the corridors, the endless hallways, all of it collapsed, like a house of cards falling in slow motion, as the light from the souls grew brighter, overwhelming the darkness. For the first time, I felt the weight lifting from my chest. The chains of the house that had bound me for so long began to dissolve, leaving me free. And as the last of the darkness faded into oblivion, the room before me opened up, revealing a new world. A world untouched by shadows, untouched by the house. It was a place of peace, of quiet tranquility, where the souls could finally rest. And I was no longer its keeper. I stepped forward, my heart, if it could still be called that, light. For the first time, I was truly free. I had ended the cycle. The house was gone. And its prisoners, the lost souls, had been released. The figure, the twisted reflection of myself, was gone. There was nothing left of it, nothing left to remind me of what I had once been. It had no power over me anymore. The world before me was new, and I would no longer be bound by the house or its endless cycle. The souls had been set free, and so had I. And somewhere, far in the distance, I felt a soft, gentle whisper. "Thank you." The silence that settled over me was unlike any silence I had ever known. It was pure, unbroken. The kind of silence that fills a space so completely. It presses in on your mind, makes you feel as though the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. But there was no something left to happen. The house, my house, had crumbled away, its dark grip slipping from my soul as I stood in the midst of what was now an empty, unrecognizable space. The air felt different now, lighter, almost weightless, as if the very atmosphere had been scrubbed clean of all the decades, centuries of suffering, and shadows that had soaked into every inch of that place. I could still feel it, though, the house. The remnants of its power lingered in the back of my mind, a faint pulse in the deepest corners of my consciousness. Like a memory I couldn't shake, like a dream fading in the morning light, it had been a part of me for so long, but now it felt distant, faint, far away. The souls, those lost, wandering souls, were no longer lost. I could feel them, their presence like a soft hum in the air, rising and falling like a gentle tide. They were free. Free to go where they wanted, free to rest, free to live in peace, their chains broken at last. For the first time, I felt empty, but not in a way that hurt. It was a calm, a quiet knowing that everything had finally been set right. The burden that had once been my prison had been lifted. The weight I had carried for so long was gone, and with it, something else had gone too, the need to belong. I had spent so much time trying to figure out who I was in the midst of it all, trying to understand why I was the one chosen, why I had been trapped in that house for so long. It had consumed me, defined me, until I was nothing more than a piece of its endless game. But now, I realized that it was never about the house. It was never about the name or the bloodline or the curse. It was always about choice. And now, I had chosen. I turned, looking around at the space that had once been filled with shadows, with walls that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. But now, it was open, wide, empty, but not in a way that was unsettling. It was empty in a way that invited new possibilities, new beginnings. The world before me stretched out vast and untamed. I took a step forward. And for the first time, I didn't feel as though I was walking toward something defined. I wasn't walking toward the door to the next room, the next cycle. No, I was walking into something I had never seen before, into something new. The ground beneath my feet was soft, like earth freshly tilled, unmarked by time or ruin. As I walked, the air grew warmer, more inviting. The light around me shifted, softening, wrapping me in its glow like a protective shield. I could feel the warmth in my skin, the pulse of life, as if the world was awakening around me. It felt like the beginning of something, a beginning that I had never known before, a beginning that I had chosen. I reached out, my hand brushing against the air, and in response, the space around me rippled like the surface of water disturbed by a breeze. The light shimmered, and then there it was, figure. For a moment, my breath caught in my chest. It was a familiar figure, one I had never seen with my eyes, but one I had known deep within my soul. The figure stepped forward, its form taking shape in the shifting light. It was her, my mother. She looked the same as she had the last time I saw her, but there was something different about her now. The pain in her eyes was gone. The weight she had carried for so long, long before I had even been born, was gone. She stood before me whole, at peace, her face soft and serene. As if she had finally found the rest she had longed for, she smiled at me. It wasn't a sad smile. It wasn't the smile of someone who had been lost. It was the smile of someone who had found what they were searching for, someone who had finally found their way home. "You've done it," she said, her voice soft, but full of warmth, like a familiar melody. "You've freed us all." I wanted to speak, to say something, but no words came. I was overwhelmed, overcome with the quiet realization that I had finally done what I had set out to do, what I had been meant to do. I had freed them all, and in doing so, I had freed myself. She reached out, her hand warm against mine, and for a moment, I felt like I had come full circle. The endless cycle, the pain, the suffering, it had all been worth it. The darkness, the house, the endless corridors of souls, they had all led me here, to this moment. "Now," she whispered, "it's time for you to live." The weight that had once pressed on my shoulders, the feeling of being lost in the shadows, began to lift. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was a part of something I couldn't escape. I was no longer bound to the house. I wasn't the keeper anymore. I wasn't a prisoner. I was free. And I realized then, in that quiet, sacred moment, that the house was gone. But the peace it had given me, it had never been about the house. It had always been about the choice to break free, the choice to walk into the light. I let go of her hand, and in that moment, the world around me seemed to expand. The light grew brighter, warmer, and I stepped forward, into the unknown, into my new beginning. And as I did, the whispering voices of the lost souls, once filled with anguish and pain, now turned into a song, a melody that echoed with peace and release. And I understood then that they too had found their place in this world, and they were free. The cycle was broken, and I was finally free. The world around me shifted once again. For a fleeting moment, I thought the peace I had found was eternal. But like a shadow, it crept back in, faint at first, a whisper at the edge of my mind. The calmness I had embraced, the freedom I had felt, began to dissolve, and something darker stirred in the corners of my thoughts. I was free, yes. Free from the house, free from its endless grasp. But the question began to form in my mind, what now? The world I had stepped into, the new world where I had felt peace, was not what I thought it would be. It was vast, yes, but there was an emptiness to it, a hollowness, as though something was missing. The skies above were wide and open, but they held no stars, no moon, just a blank canvas that stretched beyond what the eye could see. I walked. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even know what I was seeking. But the path beneath my feet seemed to wind on forever, leading me through an empty land, a place that felt like it had been waiting for something to fill it. The souls I had freed, the lost ones who had wandered the house for so long, were not with me. They had found peace, or so I had believed. But in the silence of this place, I could feel their absence as much as I could feel my own. There was no sound, no life. The wind didn't blow. The grass didn't sway. The trees, if there were any, remained unmoving, as though they had long since died. It was then that I noticed it, the faintest of echoes. It was like a vibration in the air, a ripple across the stillness. I stopped and listened, but the silence pressed in again. I couldn't hear anything, but something told me that this echo was real, that it was calling me. I continued walking, my steps slow, cautious. Every instinct told me that I was not alone. This place, this world I had entered, wasn't as empty as it appeared. There was something here. Something lurking in the shadows, waiting. But what was it? As I walked, I found myself nearing what seemed like a distant figure on the horizon. A shape. A silhouette, too vague and too far to make out in the dim light. But it was there, moving, alive. I quickened my pace, my heart picking up, though I didn't understand why. My mind raced. Could it be another soul, a guide, someone who could show me the way? Or was it something else? I could feel the pulse of the echo again, reverberating through the air. Each step I took brought the figure closer into focus. It was tall, too tall, but I couldn't make out its features. My body tensed. The feeling of something was overwhelming, like a magnetic force drawing me toward it, but I was also repelled. The distance between us closed, but before I could see who or what it was, the figure stopped. It stood still in the distance, and for a moment, we simply stared at each other. I could feel its presence, heavy and suffocating. The air around me seemed to tighten, as though the land itself was drawing in a collective breath, waiting for something to unfold. And then, without a sound, the figure turned, its long shadowed form moving swiftly across the empty landscape, disappearing into the horizon. I stood there, motionless, the weight of its presence still pressing on me. I didn't understand. What had just happened? Why had it stopped? What did it want? The silence returned, louder now, suffocating me in its intensity. I glanced around, searching for something, anything, that might explain the encounter. But there was only the wide, barren land, stretching as far as I could see. The echo, it was still there, but now, it was different. Now it was calling me. The silence enveloped me again, wrapping around me like a shroud. The figure was gone, leaving only its eerie presence lingering in the air. I stood still for a long time, unsure of what I had just experienced. The echo of its being, of its very essence, had not faded. It was there, in the air, in the ground beneath me. It was as though the entire landscape had become an extension of that figure's presence, stretched out over the horizon. I needed to move. The stillness was unbearable, as though the emptiness of this world was closing in on me, trying to swallow me whole. My feet began to move on their own, as if some unseen force was pulling me forward, urging me to follow the path that had been laid before me. The land was barren, but not in a way that was completely lifeless. It was more like a place that had been abandoned long ago, left behind to rot in the wake of something that had once been alive, something that had existed but was now gone. The colors were muted, the sky an odd shade of gray, and the air tasted stale, thick with something I couldn't name. As I moved, the ground beneath my feet shifted. The earth cracked open in places, small fissures spreading across the surface like veins running through dead skin. The echo grew louder with each step I took, pulling me toward a place I didn't know but could sense. I had been to the house. I had been the keeper. I had freed the souls. But this was different. This wasn't part of the cycle I had known. This was new. This was unfamiliar. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been here before. The path ahead of me twisted and turned, but there was no choice but to follow it. The feeling of being drawn forward intensified. A magnetic pull I couldn't explain, but couldn't resist. The figure's absence left a void, and I realized I was seeking it again, seeking something that had been left unsaid between us, something unfinished. I walked for what felt like hours, or perhaps days. Time no longer had meaning here. The world around me blurred, as if the very fabric of reality was slipping through my fingers. And then, I saw it, a door. At first I thought it was a trick of the mind, a mirage created by the desolation of the landscape. But as I stepped closer, it became undeniable. It was a large, ornate door, old and weathered, its frame covered in vines and dust. It stood there alone, in the middle of this barren, lifeless land, as if it had materialized out of nowhere. I stopped in front of it, my breath catching in my throat. It was an odd thing. This door. It didn't belong here, not in a world like this. There was no structure to support it, no walls, no buildings. Just the door, standing alone in the middle of nowhere. I reached for the handle, my hand shaking as I grasped it. There was a strange warmth to it, as if the door itself were waiting for me. The moment my fingers made contact with the cold metal, a surge of energy rushed through me, overwhelming and powerful. My body felt like it was being pulled apart, as though I were being torn between two worlds. The echoes of the souls that I had freed, the whispers from the house, filled my mind again. But this time, they weren't filled with sorrow or fear. They were filled with something else, A warning, perhaps, or a plea. It was impossible to tell, but I couldn't turn back now. I turned the handle, and the door creaked open slowly, its movement deliberate, almost alive. What lay beyond it, I could not yet see, but something told me that it was waiting for me. The air behind the door was different. Cool, a fresh, sharp scent filled my lungs, the taste of something ancient and untouched. The ground before me seemed to rise slightly, as if beckoning me to step through, and then I saw it. A figure, standing just beyond the threshold of the door. This one was different from the shadow I had seen before. This figure was tall, but no longer hidden in darkness. It was clothed in white, a flowing robe that shimmered like the very light that surrounded it. Its face was calm, serene, but its eyes were filled with something I couldn't name. They seemed to pierce through me, searching, understanding. "You have come far," the figure said, its voice deep but gentle, reverberating through the still air like a song. "Too far, perhaps." I stood frozen, unable to speak. The figure took a step toward me, and as it did, the world around us seemed to pause, as if time itself had held its breath. "You have broken the cycle," it said softly, its voice echoing in my mind. But the question remains. What will you do with this freedom? I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. The question hung in the air like a weight I couldn't bear. The figure extended a hand toward me, its fingers outstretched in an inviting gesture. There was a choice here. A choice I hadn't anticipated. And yet, I knew that whatever choice I made now would shape the world I had entered. Would I step forward? Would I leave the past behind? Would I embrace this new beginning, knowing that nothing was ever truly free? The door was open. The figure was waiting. But so was the darkness. What awaited beyond the door? What would I find in this new world? I stepped forward, crossing the threshold. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world around me shifted in a way that made my body feel light. As though gravity itself had lost its hold on me. The ground beneath my feet felt distant, soft, like stepping through a cloud, but without any of the comforting weight that clouds should bring. There was no wind, no sound, no movement. Just the absolute stillness. I could feel the figure behind me still standing at the door watching. The door had closed softly, and I didn't hear it, but I knew it had closed. I was now fully in whatever place this was. I turned, and the world around me took shape, though it remained intangible. The land before me was not barren, but instead a vast stretch of unreal beauty. The grass beneath my feet was unlike anything I had ever seen, soft and shimmering, like it was woven from strands of light. The sky above was alive with iridescent colors, swirling like the dance of galaxies, vast and endless. But what stood before me was not simply a view of untouched beauty. It was something otherworldly. I took a cautious step forward. The unfamiliar landscape stretching out before me like an endless canvas. The land seemed to pulse with a quiet rhythm, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. The entire place felt as though it were breathing, as if it, too, had once been lost and now was finding its place in the grand design. The figure that had spoken to me, the one that had waited by the door, stood before me now. It was no longer just a presence. It was fully revealed. Its form was luminous, its robes trailing in slow motion behind it, floating as though weightless. The face that gazed at me was agilous, neither old nor young, a face carved from serenity, framed by light. But what made it powerful wasn't its beauty. It was its presence. It was an ancient energy, an old soul that had seen the cycles, the beginnings, the ends of many worlds. "I see you have crossed the threshold," the figure said again, but this time its voice was not distant. It was deep, resonant, and filled with understanding. "But the journey you take now is not one for the weak." I stared at the figure, my heart still beating irregularly in my chest. I felt its gaze, penetrating and searching, as though it could see the very depths of my soul. Where am I? I finally managed to ask, my voice shaky with both fear and awe. You are between worlds, the figure answered. A place untouched by time, by cycles, by the things you've known. A place where choices are made and unmade, where what was and what could be are held in balance. It took a step closer, the light around it shifting, flickering like the stars in the sky. You've broken the cycle, yes. But the cycle was never just the house. The house was but a fragment of the greater whole. You've done what no one before you has ever done, freed yourself from the prison of the past. But now, the figure's voice trailed off, and I could see the shift in its gaze. Now comes the true test. What will you do with your newfound freedom? I felt a pang of confusion. I had thought I had already answered that question. I had chosen. I had stepped through the door. I had broken free. Wasn't that enough? But the figure continued, as if reading my thoughts. Its voice steady and patient. Freedom is not simply the absence of chains. It said, its gaze softening. It is the absence of purpose, the absence of direction. You have escaped the prison of the house, yes. But here, this, is where the real choice lies. I couldn't speak at first. My mind was a whirl of conflicting thoughts. There had been the house. There had been the endless corridors, the shadows that had clung to me for what seemed like eternity. But now I was standing in a place of peace, a place of beauty. The souls I had freed, the house I had left behind, they were gone. But what was next? What must I choose? I finally asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. The figure's expression softened, and it took another slow step closer. It was not threatening, not pressuring me. Its presence was gentle but undeniable, like an ancient wind that had swept across the land for millennia, always pushing forward, always guiding. You are the keeper of your fate now, it said, but you must decide. Will you let go of the past entirely? Will you forget the house, forget the souls you freed? Will you turn your back on everything you've learned and walk away into this unknown? The air around me thickened, the weight of the figure's words pressing against my chest. What did it mean? Was there something more to this place? To the journey I had started, the figure's hand rose, and a path began to appear before me, glowing faintly in the distance. The road ahead is open, it said, but with every step, you will find the echoes of what you've left behind. You will find those you freed, and the house, too. It will find you. The echoes will always follow you, because they are part of you now. A chill ran down my spine at the words. The house, it would follow me. Yes, the figure replied, its voice a gentle echo in the wind. It is part of you, just as the souls you freed are. You cannot fully escape it, not until you understand why it called to you, why it claimed you. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, fading into a horizon I couldn't quite make out. The weight of the decision of this choice was heavy. And as I stood there, uncertain of what my next move would be, I realized the truth: freedom was not just a doorway out. It was a door that led to countless other paths. You must choose, the figure said once again. The road ahead is for you to define. Will you walk it, or will you turn back and find the shadows again? I stood still, the wind picking up slightly, carrying with it whispers from the past. My own echoes, the echoes of the house, the souls I had freed. It was clear now. This wasn't just about breaking free. It was about understanding the consequences of freedom, about the cost of walking away from what I had once been. I stepped forward. My heart still echoing with the weight of the choice, the true meaning of freedom pressing down on me. The figure did not move as I walked. It simply watched, its glowing eyes filled with something ancient, something that had seen the unfolding of countless lives, countless choices, and yet was somehow silent in its judgment. The path before me stretched on, glowing faintly in the dim, shifting light. The ground beneath my feet felt different, less like earth, more like a soft fabric, as though the world was not solid at all, but a creation of thought, a living dream. Every step I took felt like stepping into an endless story, a story that had not yet been written. A story where I was both the protagonist and the architect. I felt the presence of the figure behind me, but it didn't speak again. I didn't need it to. The silence now felt natural, almost comforting. The path ahead was mine to take, and whatever awaited me, it would be my choice. The journey felt endless, yet oddly calming. There was no hurry, no urgency. The air around me shimmered with a faint golden glow, the sky above me constantly shifting colors. Blues, purples, and fiery oranges swirling together like the dawn of a new world. But as I walked, the path before me began to change. It twisted, turning into something unfamiliar. The gentle slope I had been walking on suddenly steepened, and the ground became more uneven, littered with rocks, roots, and debris. The golden light dimmed, replaced by patches of shadow. The world around me seemed to darken as I ventured further into the unknown. And then I heard it. A soft, distant sound, as if carried by the wind, yet it wasn't quite natural. A sound like whispering, low and indistinct, murmuring just beyond the edge of my hearing, as though the land itself was trying to speak to me. I paused, unsure. The whispers grew louder, clearer. You cannot escape it. The words came from all directions, layered over one another like the voices of 1,000 souls. The house, the cycle, it will find you. I tried to move forward, but my feet felt heavy, reluctant to continue. The path ahead was now shrouded in mist, and though I had no idea what was lurking in that mist, I could feel its presence. Something was waiting, and it wasn't just the house. It wasn't just the past that had come to find me. No, this was something else. It was a deeper, darker pull, a shadow I couldn't name, but one I knew had always been there. I turned slowly, but the figure behind me was no longer standing still. It was now moving toward me, its form shifting and flickering like the play of shadows on a stormy night. You must understand, it said, its voice no longer warm, but cold, distant. The house will never leave you. It is in you. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to believe it. But I knew, deep inside, that the house, the shadows, the souls, the endless cycle, was still with me. It had been born into me, and no matter how far I walked, no matter how many worlds I crossed, it would follow me. It had always followed me. It would always find me. I stepped back, almost as if I was retreating from the figure, but there was nowhere to go. The land around me had closed in, and the path was narrowing, growing tighter as if the very world was closing its grip around me. The figure was now standing right in front of me, its eyes burning with that same ancient light. There was no escape, no turning back, and yet I felt something stir deep within me, something stronger than the house's influence, something that had been born with me, something I hadn't understood until now. The figure spoke again, its voice dark, almost predatory. You are part of the house. It is part of you. Your freedom is only an illusion. I closed my eyes, but I didn't shrink from its presence. Something deep inside me resisted, something that had always been there, but had been buried beneath the weight of the past, the house, the endless cycle. I opened my eyes again, and this time, the figure wasn't alone. Surrounding it were shadows, thick, oppressive, shifting in ways I couldn't comprehend. But I could feel them, feel the souls trapped within them, the very souls I had once freed. They hovered around me, reaching for me, trying to pull me back into the cycle. No, the word wasn't a thought. It wasn't a whisper. It was a command. The ground beneath me shuddered. And in that moment, I realized what I had to do. I could feel it. The key, the path, the freedom had never been about escaping the house entirely. It had never been about leaving the past behind. It had always been about mastering it, about accepting it, not as a prison, but as part of my story, part of what made me who I was. I raised my hand, feeling the pulse of energy surge through me. It wasn't a magical power, nor a divine gift. It was me. It was the essence of what I had become. The power of the house and the souls within it that had shaped me. And with that power, I embraced the darkness. The figure recoiled as the shadows around me shrank back. The whispers of the souls turned into cries of confusion, of resistance. The house itself seemed to shudder, its presence flickering and fading in and out of reality. The cycle was breaking, unraveling at my command. "You cannot break it?" the figure hissed, but its voice was now weak, trembling. "It is part of you. You cannot change what you are." And I smiled. "I am what I am," I said, my voice steady, powerful, "but I choose who I become." With that, I took another step forward. The land before me opened up, wide and bright, the shadows retreating, unable to hold me anymore. The figure, the house, it had no more power over me. I had broken free, not by leaving the past, but by accepting it. And now, I could walk forward into whatever came next, no longer bound by the chains of the house or the shadows that tried to claim me. And as I walked, I knew, deep in my soul, that I was no longer a prisoner. I was something new, something that would no longer be defined by the past. I had become the master of my own fate. I walked forward, the light in front of me brighter, warmer. I could feel the weight of the past lifting from my shoulders, but it wasn't just freedom that filled the space around me now. It was understanding. An understanding of who I was, of the choices I had made, and of the world that I had left behind. The figure that had once haunted me, the one that had tried to draw me back into the cycle, was gone. Its form had disintegrated, as if it had never truly existed at all. The shadows around me no longer whispered. The land, once oppressive, had now become soft and welcoming, its golden light filling every inch of the horizon. But there was a new presence. It was subtle at first, like a ripple in the air, a shift in the atmosphere. It was familiar, too familiar. I paused. My heart quickened. The silence stretched long and taut, until I finally dared to turn. And there it was, a mirror. It stood in the middle of the land, framed in ancient wood, its surface gleaming with an unnatural light. The edges were etched with symbols, strange, foreign, but somehow mine. They weren't just marks. They were echoes of my past, of the house, of the souls, of everything that had made me who I was. I couldn't look away. The mirror was a paradox. It shouldn't have been here. There were no walls, no buildings, no structures in this new world. How could there be a mirror in the middle of the open landscape? But there it stood, untouched by the wind, unmoving, its surface reflecting the world around it, but with a twist. It didn't just reflect what was in front of it. It reflected everything. As I stepped closer, the mirror seemed to pulse, the images shifting and changing, like the reflections were not entirely my own. I saw myself in the glass, but it wasn't the version of me I had left behind. No, this was a version of me I didn't recognize. A me that was hollow, trapped in the same cycle I had just escaped. I stepped forward, my breath catching in my throat. The reflection in the mirror changed again, showing me scenes from the past, memories I had long buried. I saw the house, the dark, oppressive place, the never-ending corridors, the doors that had once been my prison. I saw myself walking through those halls, a keeper, bound by duty, consumed by darkness. I saw the souls I had freed. They moved in and out of the mirror, flickering like shadows, their faces twisted with pain, lost in the same cycle I had been. And then, the reflection shifted again. I saw the figure, the one that had tried to pull me back, the one who had whispered words of doubt and fear. But now, it was different. It wasn't just a figure. It was me. I froze. The reflection stared back at me with cold, hollow eyes, its expression unreadable. I didn't understand. I had broken the cycle. I had freed myself. But now the mirror was showing me a version of me that still clung to the past, to the house, to the shadows. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The mirror didn't answer, but I didn't need it to. I knew what it was showing me. It was showing me my own reflection. The parts of myself I had tried to bury, the parts that still held the house, the past, the darkness within. The house had been a prison, but it was also a part of me. The figure that had followed me, the echoes that haunted me, they were all fragments of who I was, of what I had been. I had tried to escape them, to leave them behind. But I couldn't, not completely, because they were part of my story, part of me. The mirror was not just a reflection of my past, it was a reminder that I couldn't fully be free until I embraced all of myself. The house, the darkness, the souls, they had all shaped me, they had made me who I was. And if I truly wanted to move forward, to step into this new world, I needed to accept that part of me. I reached out, my hand trembling as I touched the surface of the mirror. The glass was cool, but it vibrated under my touch, alive with the energy of everything I had left behind. The mirror rippled, distorting the reflection, warping the images into something unrecognizable. And then, something strange happened. The reflection shifted again, and this time, it wasn't just me standing in the mirror. I saw them, the souls, not trapped in the cycle, not lost, but free. Free in a way I hadn't yet fully understood. They were standing beside me, their forms glowing with a soft, peaceful light. Their eyes, once filled with agony and confusion, were now calm. They were no longer wandering. They had found their place, and I understood then. The house was not just about imprisonment. It was about growth. It was about understanding who we were, what we had become. The souls hadn't been trapped by the house alone. They had been trapped by their own fears, their own unwillingness to move beyond what they had known. But I had found the courage to face my past, to accept it, and that had freed not just me, but them as well. The mirror began to dissolve, the glass shattering into 1,000 shimmering pieces that scattered across the landscape. The light that had once been contained within it spread, flowing through the land like a river of light, and the path ahead of me, no longer dark, no longer uncertain, became clear. I didn't need the mirror anymore. I didn't need the echoes. I had embraced what I had been, what I had become. And now I could move forward into the unknown, into the light of a new world. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my footfall light but sure. The land around me responded, the shadows retreating, the light intensifying. The cycle was broken. The past had been embraced, not erased. And now, the future was mine to shape. I stepped forward, the light swirling around me, casting vibrant hues across the vast, unbroken expanse. The broken mirror, now shattered into fragments of light, drifted upward, fading into the horizon as if it had never existed. And yet the moment of clarity it had given me remained. Strong, clear, a knowledge embedded deep within me. I had accepted my past. I had understood the nature of the cycle, the truth of my journey, and the shadows that had once clung to me. But there was one thing left, one last piece of the puzzle. I had not simply been released from the house. I had been chosen to break the cycle, to be the one who could reshape it, to create something beyond what had come before. The house was only a fragment of a larger reality, a place that fed on fear and memories, and I was now the one who could decide how that energy was used. The land before me, the one that had seemed so barren and empty, was not truly empty at all. It was waiting for me to create, waiting for me to mold it into something that reflected not just the past, but the potential of the future. I realized now that I was not only free of the house, I was the architect of what came next. What I created, what I decided, would shape the future of this world, of the souls, of the land itself. But how did one begin? How did one build from nothing? As I stood in the center of the expansive world, my feet sinking slightly into the soft ground, I felt the pulse of something deep within the earth. It was like the heartbeat of the world itself, the primal rhythm that connected everything in this place. It called to me, urging me to listen, to understand its language. I closed my eyes and reached out with my mind, allowing the pulse to wash over me. The land responded, a quiet hum rippling through the ground. And before my very eyes, the earth began to change. It was subtle at first, a slight shift in the horizon, the trees beginning to sway with a breeze that I hadn't felt before. The air grew richer, as if something dormant had awoken within it. The light shifted, growing warmer, deeper, as though it was being shaped by unseen hands. I felt the presence of the souls again, not as echoes, but as beacons. They were not lost. They were not waiting anymore. They were gathered, scattered across the landscape, each one flickering with a soft light, their forms now peaceful and whole. They were connected to me, connected to the land, and in turn, the land was connected to them. I understood. This place, this world, was a canvas, a blank slate where creation could happen. The souls were not bound by the house anymore, but they still needed purpose. They still needed direction, guidance, and it was my role to give that, to shape a new world, not by force, but by the natural rhythm that had always existed within me. I raised my hand, and with a deep breath, I called on the energy that flowed through this place, through my very being. The land responded, the ground shifting beneath me, responding to my will. Trees grew tall in an instant, their trunks thickening and their branches stretching toward the sky, heavy with rich, green leaves. Flowers bloomed beneath my feet, their colors bright, their petals delicate, casting soft shadows against the glowing ground. The air filled with the scent of fresh earth, and the sky above me rippled with the soft colors of dawn, like the first light of creation. The souls gathered around me, drawn to the energy I was now creating. They were no longer just wandering. They were becoming part of this world. Their light shimmered around me, and I could feel their essence blending with the land, each soul contributing to the vibrancy of the place, adding its own spark to the landscape I was molding. The figure from before, the one who had watched me, stepped forward again. It was not the same as it had been before. Now it was more like a guide, more like a witness to this new creation. It stood silently, its presence no longer heavy or oppressive. It was just there, as part of this new world, waiting, watching, but not commanding. "You've done it," the figure said, its voice calm and full of reverence. "You've broken the cycle, but you've also created something new." I looked around, my gaze sweeping over the growing landscape, the souls standing in the light, the sky rippling in infinite colors. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't just part of the world. I was the world. "You've freed me," I said softly, my voice filled with understanding. "But this is not just about me. This is about them." The figure nodded, its face serene. "Yes. You've given them what they never had in life. A chance to create, a chance to live beyond the cycle." I looked down at my hands, feeling the pulse of energy still flowing through me. I was the creator now, the one who could shape not just my own fate, but the fate of the world. But there was no longer any fear in me. The darkness had been overcome, not through destruction, but through acceptance, through embracing what I had been and using it to build something better. I turned back to the souls, their lights now blending together, their forms bright free. They had found their place, and I had given it to them. The land now thrived because of them, and they, too, thrived because of the land. "I will guide them," I said, my voice steady. "I will guide us all, together." And as I spoke those words, the land seemed to expand further, ripples of light spreading out like waves, covering the horizon. The sky grew clearer, more brilliant. The trees, the flowers, the grass, all began to pulse with life, responding to the energy that flowed through me. The house, the cycle, the shadows, all of it faded into the distance, not forgotten, but no longer part of what I had become. The road ahead was open, and with each step, the world responded. New paths, new lives, new worlds unfolded before me, as endless as the horizon, as bright as the stars. And this time, I wasn't running away. I was creating. As I stood there, feeling the pulse of creation under my feet, the landscape stretched outward endlessly. The light around me flickered and hummed like a heartbeat, pulsing with the energy that I had summoned. The souls were now walking beside me, each one finding its place in this world. It was as though the land itself was alive, responding to the desires, to the needs of those who had wandered lost for so long. The house, the darkness, the oppressive weight that had hung over me for so long, those were no longer relevant. They were far behind me, fading into the distant past, just as the soul's cries had faded. But there was still something, an unspoken sense of unfinished business, a feeling that while the cycle had been broken, the world was still not whole. The figure, my guide, my silent witness, watched me with quiet intensity. It said nothing, simply observing. But it felt as though it was waiting for me to realize something, waiting for me to take the next step, to build upon what had already been created. I could feel the weight of the world in my hands. I had shaped it. Yes, I had created this world, this new reality, but the truth was, I had only begun to shape it. The souls had been freed, but they too were lost in their freedom. They didn't know what to do, how to move forward. They were free, yes, but they still lacked purpose. And that's when I understood. It wasn't just about creation. It wasn't just about shaping a world. It was about guiding it. About leading the souls, about showing them what it meant to be free, to exist in this new world without the constraints of the cycle. Guide them, the figure said, its voice like a whisper, but this time it wasn't just a suggestion. It was a command. The world is yours, but it is not yet finished. You are the architect, the creator, but also the teacher. The ones you freed, they need you. I nodded slowly. I understood now. I had been given the gift of creation, yes, but I had also been given the responsibility to shape and guide this new world. It wasn't enough to simply free the souls from the house. They needed purpose. They needed direction. They needed to learn how to live again in a world without walls. But the question was, where to begin? I stepped forward, my mind racing with possibilities, with 1,000 different ways to shape this new reality. As I moved, the ground beneath me shifted, responding to my thoughts, my intentions. The land itself seemed to listen, to adapt, to change with each idea I formed. I closed my eyes and focused. I had the power to create, the power to shape worlds. And in that moment, I felt something deep inside me stir, a connection to something older, deeper, something that had always been there, but had been hidden beneath the weight of the past. Balance. That was what this world needed. Balance between creation and destruction, between freedom and purpose. I couldn't just shape a world where everything was perfect. I had to give the souls a way to thrive, to grow, to learn from their freedom. They needed the challenge, the struggle, the very thing that made existence meaningful. The house had been a prison, yes, but it had also been a teacher. A harsh teacher, but a teacher nonetheless. It had forced the souls to evolve, to grow, to find purpose. I was the one who would teach them now. I was the one who would show them how to live in this new world. As I stood there, focusing on the world around me, the ground beneath me began to form, shaping itself into something new. I could feel the energy of the land of the souls guiding my thoughts. The world responded, shifting, growing, blooming into something rich with life. The sky above me began to change as well, the colors deepening, becoming more vibrant. The trees began to grow taller, their branches intertwining, creating a canopy that seemed to reach toward the heavens. The air filled with the scent of fresh flowers, of growing things, and the sound of birds singing. Real, tangible life was returning to this place, and with it, a sense of purpose. But as the world flourished, I could feel something else stirring beneath the surface. A challenge. The land was not yet whole. The world was still growing, still evolving, and with that growth came struggles. The balance was fragile. The souls that had once been freed were now scattered, and not all of them had the strength to find their place. Some wandered, unsure of where they belonged, of what their purpose was. I had been given the responsibility to guide them, but that didn't mean it would be easy. Some of the souls, I knew, would resist. Some would not want to accept the freedom they had been granted. Some would still long for the security of the house, of the cycle they had known. They would fight against change. I turned to the figure, seeking guidance, but it was silent, watching me with that calm, knowing expression. It wasn't going to give me the answer. It wasn't meant to. This was my responsibility, my journey. I closed my eyes again, and as I did, the land around me began to pulse with a deep rhythm, a heartbeat of the world. I could feel the land, the trees, the air, all alive, connected, waiting for the next step. I raised my hand, and as I did, the land responded. I summoned the energy of the world around me, feeling it flow through me, through the souls, and I moved the land. I shaped it, not with force, but with the power of balance, gently, firmly, creating a new beginning for the souls. The landscape shifted, and in the distance, I saw something emerge from the earth. A city. Not a city of stone and iron, but of living trees and flowing water, a place that would grow as the souls did. A place where they could build, where they could find purpose, where they could live in harmony with the land, with each other. The first steps had been taken. The world had been created, but it was still young. It was still fragile, but it was alive. And as I looked out at the growing city, I knew that this was only the beginning. The souls would find their place. They would learn. They would grow. And together, we would shape a world that wasn't bound by the past, by the house, or the endless cycle. This was a new world, a world of creation. And in that world, I was the creator. As the city began to take form, growing organically from the earth itself, I stood at the edge, watching in awe. What had once been an empty landscape, barren and silent, was now filled with life, pulsing with potential. Trees rose from the ground like ancient guardians, their trunks thick with wisdom, their branches reaching upward, sheltering the land below. Rivers of shimmering water wound their way through the city, carving paths through fields of green, flowers blooming along the banks. The light of the sky danced across the water, casting reflections that made the world feel alive. Alive in a way that the house, the cycle, had never allowed. The souls that had once wandered aimlessly now moved through the streets, their forms glowing softly in the dusk, like twilight of this world. They walked with purpose now, their eyes wide with wonder, discovering the beauty of this place that was unlike anything they had ever known. They had been freed, yes, but now they were alive again, with a purpose. I had given them the gift of freedom, and in turn, they had given me the gift of creation. Together, we had shaped something new. But I knew deep within me that there was still more to be done. This was only the beginning. The foundation had been laid, but the city, this world, would need more. I walked down the newly formed pathways, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet, as though the city itself was listening to my every thought. There were no roads or structures that were rigid, but instead the land grew as organically as the trees. Everything was connected, flowing like the rivers that wound their way through the city. It was a place where nothing was static, where everything was in constant motion, constantly evolving. And yet, beneath the vibrant beauty, I could feel the undercurrent of unease. It wasn't the land that unsettled me. It was the souls. Though they walked freely, and their faces glowed with the freedom I had granted them, I could sense their hesitation. Some still moved with uncertainty. Some seemed to be looking for something, something they couldn't find, something they hadn't fully grasped. I couldn't blame them. After centuries of being trapped in the house, after being bound by the cycle, the idea of freedom was an abstract concept, something that couldn't be fully understood or embraced all at once. The figure had been right. The cycle may have been broken, but the journey had just begun. The souls needed purpose. They needed a new understanding of what it meant to be free. Without the house, without the cycle to define them, many of them were lost. I could see it in their eyes as they walked past me, their gazes distant, as though they were waiting for something I had yet to give them. I paused, standing at the edge of a new park that had formed at the heart of the city. It was filled with wildflowers and tall grasses, and at the center, a massive tree had grown. Its roots spread deep into the earth, and its branches arched high above me, as if reaching out to touch the sky. The air around it buzzed with energy, and I could sense that it was more than just a tree. It was something special. It was the heart of this new world, the beating pulse that held everything together. I approached it, placing my hand against its trunk, and I felt the deep resonance of its presence. It was more than wood and bark. It was alive, in a way that made me understand something deeper about this world. I closed my eyes, feeling the energy flow through me, through the tree and through the land. The world was still in its infancy, but it was not just a world of life. It was a world of creation. And the tree, it was the embodiment of that creation. Help them grow, I whispered, as though speaking to the tree itself. Help them see what they are capable of. In response, the tree began to shift. Its branches reached even higher, and its roots spread wider, touching every corner of the city. From within its bark, tiny lights began to appear, small, flickering, like stars being born. And as the lights flickered, the souls began to gather around it. They looked at the tree, then at each other. Slowly, they began to step forward, drawn to the lights. And as they reached the tree, something changed. I felt it. A shift in the air, a deepening of understanding. They were starting to see it. The tree wasn't just a symbol of life. It was a symbol of growth. The souls had been free, but they had not yet fully understood what it meant to grow beyond the cycle they had once been trapped in. They needed to realize that freedom wasn't just about release from the past. It was about embracing the future. It was about becoming something more. The souls began to touch the lights that had emerged from the tree, and as they did, I saw something incredible. Their forms, once glowing and insubstantial, began to solidify. They became more real. Their faces became clearer, their bodies more defined, their presence more tangible. They were growing. The lights from the tree were like seeds, seeds of purpose, of understanding. And as the souls touched them, they began to understand what they had once lacked, that freedom was not something given. It was something earned. It was something created. I stepped back, watching in awe as the transformation unfolded. The tree, with its vast, stretching branches, became a conduit for the growth of the souls. They were no longer wandering. They were becoming active participants in this world. They were no longer passive beings, no longer lost in the echo of their past lives. They were now creators, too. But just as I began to feel the satisfaction of their transformation, something caught my attention. The sky above, which had once been calm, began to shift again, darkening. The wind picked up, swirling around me, and the soft hum of energy that had filled the land began to waver. Something was coming. I turned, sensing the change in the air, the growing tension. The land had shifted once, but now it seemed to be shifting again. Something was about to emerge from the depths of this world, and I had the distinct feeling it would not be something that I could simply create away. The trees rustled, the ground trembled, and the figure, the one who had guided me before, stepped forward once again. It was not the same. This time, its presence was heavier, filled with a deep, ancient energy. It stood before me, not as a guide, but as a warning. "You've created a world," the figure said, its voice darker now. "But there are forces here that are not bound by your creation. There are things that the house never allowed you to see, things that live in the depths of this world. And they are waking up." The ground beneath us began to crack, and a dark shadow emerged from the earth, curling its way upward. It was a force, a presence, far darker than anything I had ever felt before. And I realized, too late, that the cycle may have been broken, but the balance was far more fragile than I had ever imagined. The dark shadow that emerged from the earth seemed to grow with each passing second. It twisted and writhed like smoke, but with a solid, heavy presence that tugged at the very air around it. The light of the newly created world dimmed, flickering as if it too was unsure of what to make of this force. The ground beneath my feet trembled, and the once vibrant trees, the glowing flowers, seemed to wither in response to this encroaching darkness. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, feeling the weight of the situation. The figure, once a silent witness, now a harbinger of something much more dangerous, stood with me, its expression unreadable, but its presence full of warning. "You were given the power to create," the figure said, its voice echoing in the air. "But with that power comes responsibility. You have awakened something that should have remained asleep." I turned to face it, my mind racing. "What is it? What have I awakened?" The figure did not answer directly, but its gaze shifted to the darkness rising before us, and for the first time, I saw something akin to sorrow in its eyes. "This land," it said slowly, "was never meant to be fully free. You have created it, yes, but you also unleashed what was always meant to stay hidden. The balance that was held by the house, the cycle that existed, was not just a prison. It was a containment." The ground beneath my feet shifted again, as though the earth itself was recoiling from the dark force. I felt the power of it crawling under my skin, a presence far older and more dangerous than anything I had encountered before. It felt as if the very fabric of the world was ripping apart. "Containment?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean? I freed them. I created a new world. Why is this happening?" The figure took a step forward, its expression grave. "You freed them, yes. But you did not understand the full nature of what you were doing. The house was not just a prison for the souls. It was a barrier, a seal that held something darker at bay." As if on cue, the dark shadow that had risen from the earth expanded rapidly, its tendrils reaching into the sky, stretching further and further with each passing second. The ground cracked open, and the air grew thick with tension, as if something ancient and terrifying was stirring, awakening. "What is it?" I whispered, the fear growing inside me. The figure was silent for a moment, watching the darkness grow. "The thing you have awakened is not just a force. It is an entity that existed before the house, before any of this. The house was built to trap it, to keep it contained. And now, it is free." I felt the weight of the words settle heavily on my chest. The house had been a prison, yes, but it had also been a protection. The souls had been trapped in a cycle, yes, but they had been kept safe from this. Whatever it was. The darkness before me continued to grow, and I could feel its pull, a gravitational force that tugged at the very core of my being. It was like a magnet, drawing everything toward it, pulling at the edges of the world I had created, threatening to consume everything. The figure finally spoke again, its voice full of regret. "You were meant to create, but you did not know the consequences of your creation. This force, it is ancient. It is not of this world. It is something from beyond the fabric of creation itself. And now, it will seek to reclaim what it has lost." I understood now. The house was never just a prison for the souls. It was a shield, a barrier that had held back a force far older and darker than anything I could have imagined. The souls had been trapped. Yes, but they had been kept safe from this thing, from whatever it was. And now that I had broken the cycle, now that I had freed them, the shield had shattered, and this force was awakening. The darkness reached out further, its tendrils stretching, expanding across the land, swallowing everything in its path. The trees, the flowers, the rivers, all withered and died as it passed, its very presence draining the life from everything it touched. The souls that had been walking freely now screamed, their forms flickering in and out of existence as the shadow enveloped them. "No," I shouted, my voice filled with desperation. I reached out toward the souls, but they were already slipping away, consumed by the darkness. The figure stepped forward, its eyes full of a deep, unspoken sorrow. "You cannot save them. Not all of them. The darkness is too great." I felt the weight of those words in my chest, a crushing realization that threatened to break me. The souls I had freed were being consumed, torn apart by the very force I had unknowingly unleashed, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. "No," I whispered, feeling the word I had worked so hard to build slipping away. "There has to be something I can do." The figure was silent for a long moment. "You can do something," it said softly, "but it will not be easy. You will need to face the darkness head on. You will need to embrace it, understand it, and contain it. You are the one who created this world, and you are the only one who can stop it from collapsing." I looked at the darkness, at the souls still flickering in its grasp, at the land that was withering before my eyes. I felt the weight of the decision ahead of me, the terrible responsibility of it. The balance of the world I had created was hanging by a thread, and the only way to save it was to confront the very force that had existed before creation itself. I closed my eyes, feeling the pulse of the world beneath my feet, the beating heart of this place. I had created it, I had freed the souls, and now I had to protect them. I had to stand against the darkness, against whatever ancient force sought to consume it all. "I will face it," I said, my voice steady despite the fear in my chest. "I will stop it." The figure nodded, its gaze filled with something resembling hope. "Then go. And remember, you are the creator now. You shaped this world." I stepped forward, feeling the ground beneath me shift and tremble. The darkness loomed ahead, vast and consuming, but I was no longer afraid. I was the creator. I had built this world, and I would protect it. I would face the darkness, and I would defeat it. The darkness loomed ahead of me, a churning mass of tendrils and shifting shadows, pulsing with an energy that felt ancient, primal. It was no longer just a shadow, it was a presence. A force that filled the very air, a malevolent force that threatened to swallow everything I had worked so hard to create. I stepped forward, my body trembling with both fear and determination. Every part of me screamed to run, to flee from the impossible task ahead, but I couldn't. I was the creator of this world. I had freed the souls, and now I was their protector. This darkness had been sealed for aeons, but it was awake now. It was loose, and I was the one who had to stop it. As I approached the writhing mass, I could feel it, its power like a dark storm on the horizon, building and building until it would consume everything in its path. The air around me grew heavier with each step, the weight of the world pressing down on me. The very earth beneath my feet seemed to groan with the strain. I raised my hand, feeling the energy within me pulse with purpose, but the darkness did not retreat. If anything, it rippled, responding to my presence like a predator sensing its prey. "You are too late." A voice rumbled from the depths of the shadow, a deep, guttural sound that made my bones tremble. It was not a voice from the figure, nor from any soul I had freed. It was something else, something older. "The cycle has ended, yes. But you have only unleashed what was never meant to be free." The tendrils of darkness shifted, reaching toward me, curling and twisting in the air like serpents. I could feel the weight of its gaze, the pressure of its presence, pressing in on me, trying to invade my very soul. The force was overwhelming, and for a moment, I felt the panic rise in my chest. But then I remembered, I was the creator. I had given this world life, and I could take control. I had shaped it. I had brought the souls back to life. This was my world. No, I said, my voice stronger now, filled with the resolve I hadn't realized I still had. I will not let you destroy what I have built. I am the creator of this world, and you do not belong here. The darkness roared in response, a violent, seething sound that shook the very ground beneath me. Its tendrils lashed out faster than I could react, and I felt the air grow cold, the light fading as the darkness surrounded me. But I did not retreat. I stood my ground. I closed my eyes, focusing on the pulse of energy within me. The same energy that had created this world. The same energy that had allowed me to shape the land and free the souls. I reached deep into that power, feeling it surge through me, connecting me to everything I had created. The tree, the rivers, the land, the souls, they were all part of me now. And the darkness, though powerful, was not invincible. With a deep breath, I extended my hand, feeling the energy flow from me into the air, like a wave crashing against the shore. The darkness resisted, fighting back with all its strength, but I pushed. The tendrils of shadow recoiled, and I could feel the darkness falter, hesitate, as if it was unsure of itself. For the first time, it wasn't in control. "You cannot control me," I whispered, my voice steady with conviction. "You are nothing but a remnant, a shadow of what once was, and I create now." The air hummed with the energy of my words, and as I spoke, the world around me responded. The ground beneath me shook, and the sky above rippled with energy. The land, once fragile, now felt strong, as if it were resisting the dark force that sought to consume it. The figure, the guide, appeared beside me, its form glowing with the light that had once been mine. It said nothing, but its presence was reassuring. It was not here to fight, but to witness the moment that would decide the fate of this world. The fate of all those who had been freed. And then I felt it. The energy, the power that had been holding the darkness at bay, was not just mine, it was ours. The souls I had freed, the land I had shaped, they were with me now. Their light, their energy, all of it was part of the battle. I raised my hand higher, and the land responded, pushing back against the darkness. The trees, the rivers, the flowers, all of them swelled with light, their energy amplifying, joining together to form a wave of light that surged toward the shadows. "No," the darkness hissed, its voice filled with rage. "You cannot defeat me. I am eternal. I have always existed." "Not anymore," I replied, my voice unwavering. I concentrated, gathering every ounce of energy I had, and released it in one final surge. The light exploded from my hand, washing over the darkness like a cleansing tide. The shadow screamed as it was engulfed, its form writhing and twisting in the light, but it couldn't escape. The land, the souls, the very essence of this world, all of it was united in this final act. The darkness had no place here anymore. It was not meant to exist in a world of creation. And as the light burned away the last remnants of the shadow, I felt the world around me settle into peace. The land, the souls, the trees, they were all alive. They were whole. The darkness had been pushed back, contained, and with it, the cycle had truly come to an end. The figure beside me nodded, its presence fading as the world around me shifted once again, settling into a state of calm. "You have done it," it said softly. "You have broken the cycle, created this world, and brought balance where there was none. You are not just the creator. You are the guardian, the protector." I looked around, at the city now flourishing before me, at the souls walking freely, at the land thriving. Untouched by the darkness, I was no longer a prisoner. I was no longer bound by the house. I was free, we were free, and together we would build something new, something strong, something that would endure for eternity. As the last remnants of darkness were extinguished, the land settled into a peaceful quiet. The shadows, once so oppressive, now seemed like nothing more than a distant memory. The skies above me, once filled with tumultuous clouds, had cleared, revealing a vast expanse of stars stretching endlessly in every direction. A soft, pale moon rose over the horizon, casting a gentle glow across the newly reborn world. I stood still for a moment, breathing in the cool air, allowing myself a fleeting moment of relief. The battle was over. The darkness had been contained. The souls were free, and the world was alive with possibility. But deep within, I could still feel the weight of the responsibility. The creation of this world had been no simple act, and though I had shaped it with care and intention, I knew it was far from finished. The souls that walked this new land were still searching for purpose. The world I had crafted was still young, fragile, and uncertain. It would require more than just creation. It would require nurturing, guiding, and tending to the growth of this new existence. I turned, looking back at the city, the heart of this world. It was a place of life, yes, but it was also a place of learning. The souls had been freed, but they were still learning how to live again, how to exist in a world without the confines of the cycle, without the shadow of the house hanging over them. They needed guidance, structure, and a sense of purpose, something I had not yet given them. I walked toward the center of the city, my feet light upon the soft earth. The once vibrant streets were now quiet, the souls moving about slowly, some talking amongst themselves, others lost in thought. They had no destination, no clear direction. They were like seedlings, sprouting from the ground, but lacking the strength to find their way toward the light. I couldn't help them by simply creating. I had to teach them how to grow. I stepped into the heart of the city, where a massive, ancient tree stood. It was the same tree I had seen earlier, the one whose roots spread deep into the earth, whose branches arched high above, reaching for the heavens. The tree had been the anchor of this world, the source of life and growth. It was the pulse of creation, and now it was time for me to build around it. I placed my hand on the tree's bark, feeling the hum of its energy, the deep connection it had with the land. It was a symbol of life, of the potential that lay within the world I had created, but I knew it wasn't enough. The tree could not teach the souls how to grow. It could not guide them toward purpose. That was my task. The souls had been freed from the house, yes, but they had not yet learned how to truly live in this world. They had been trapped for so long that their understanding of existence had been warped by the cycle. They needed to be shown how to move forward, how to embrace their freedom, how to become active participants in the world. I closed my eyes and reached deep into the energy that connected everything: the tree, the land, the souls. It was a web of life, a network that pulsed with possibility. I could feel the weight of it, the potential of the world resting in my hands. This was the next step in my journey, not to shape the world, but to nurture it, to teach the souls how to live, to give them the guidance they so desperately needed. As I focused, the world around me began to change once again. The tree's roots spread further into the land, but now new growth began to emerge. Vines and flowers curled upward, twisting into shapes that were both beautiful and functional. I felt the energy of the world expand, moving beyond the physical land. It stretched into the souls that were still wandering the city, touching their hearts, their minds. I extended my arms, and from the earth below, the energy of creation surged up, forming into glowing threads of light. Each thread connected to a soul, wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. The light wasn't forceful. It was nurturing, warm, inviting. It flowed into the souls, bringing them understanding, bringing them purpose. I could feel the shift as the souls responded. They no longer wandered aimlessly. They began to move with intention, with direction. They didn't know what their purpose was yet, but they felt it. The light filled them with the knowledge that they were part of something greater, that they had a place here, that they were no longer just freed. They were free to become. I felt a surge of pride. This was not the end of the journey. This was the beginning of something new, something that required patience, care, and guidance. The souls would no longer be trapped in the cycle, nor would they wander aimlessly. They would learn to create, to build, to live with purpose. They would learn to embrace their freedom and shape their own paths. And I would be there to guide them. As I stood there, watching the souls begin to move through the city with newfound purpose, I realized that my role was not just to be a creator. I was a teacher, a guide, a protector. My task was not just to shape the world, but to ensure that it grew, organically, naturally, with balance and care. The city began to take shape more clearly now. The structure forming around the heart of the tree. Buildings began to rise, not from stone and metal, but from the land itself, shaped by the same organic energy that had created the world. The souls, now more focused, began to gather in groups, starting to build, to create, to form communities. They began to find their place in this new world, their purpose starting to take root. But just as the first signs of life and progress began to emerge, I felt something else. A tremor in the ground beneath me. It was faint at first, but I could feel the weight of it, the pull of something distant, something dark. The balance of this world was fragile, I realized. The darkness had been contained, yes, but its influence had not been eradicated. It was still there, lingering in the depths, waiting for its chance to return. I knew, in that moment, that my work was not yet done. The world I had created was still in its infancy. It was fragile, like a seedling just beginning to take root, and there were forces, dark forces, that would not rest until they had taken everything I had built. I would have to protect it, protect them. The trembling of the earth grew stronger, more pronounced. The light that had once flooded this world, the light I had so carefully nurtured, now felt diminished, as though it were being pulled away, absorbed by something unseen, something waiting beneath the surface. I felt it in my bones, the pull. The darkness had been contained for now, yes, but it wasn't gone. It was still lurking, buried deep beneath the roots of this world, hidden but very much alive. I closed my eyes, focusing, reaching deep into the pulse of the land beneath me. The ground was no longer solid, no longer stable. It was shaking, shifting, as though something was awakening deep within the earth, and whatever it wasn't done yet. It was not going to simply stay buried. It was going to fight back. The souls around me were beginning to notice too. They paused in their work, looking around, their faces drawn with confusion and unease. They could sense it. Even they, with their newfound purpose, could feel the subtle tremor beneath their feet. I turned to the heart of the city, the tree, the ancient symbol of life and growth. The tree that had been my anchor. I placed my hand against its bark again, feeling the deep rhythm of the world pulsing through it. But there was something new in that pulse. Something out of sync. The very heart of this world was beginning to beat differently. The figure, the guide, appeared beside me, its face grim, its presence heavier than before. It, too, could feel the shift. The air had changed. It was thick now, suffocating, as though the world itself was holding its breath. You felt it too, I said, my voice steady but laced with concern. The figure nodded. The balance is fragile, it said quietly. This world has been created, but it is not finished. There is still darkness here, buried in the roots of this land. It is waiting. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of its words settle on my chest. But we contained it, I said, though I wasn't sure who I was reassuring. We stopped it. I stopped it. The figure turned its gaze toward me, its eyes filled with an ancient understanding, and for the first time, I saw not just a guide, but a witness to the depths of this place. It knew more than it had ever revealed. "You stopped at once," the figure said slowly, its voice like the rustle of leaves in the wind. "But stopping it is not the same as ending it. The darkness that remains here is not just a shadow of the house. It is an entity in itself, an ancient presence that was never fully vanquished." The air around me seemed to pulse with that energy again, the land reacting to the figure's words. The tremors beneath my feet grew stronger, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant awakening from its slumber. I stepped back, instinctively reaching for the ground, for the pulse that had once been the source of creation. But now, it felt different. The energy was being drained. The very land I had shaped was beginning to lose its vitality. "I have to stop it," I said, more to myself than to the figure. "It's here. It's not buried anymore. It's awake. I can feel it." The figure looked at me with solemn eyes. "You cannot stop it alone." I frowned, a bitter sense of unease beginning to settle in my chest. "What do you mean?" "There is no simple solution to this," the figure said, its voice heavy with the weight of truth. "The darkness has a root here, one that connects directly to the heart of this world. You cannot destroy it as you did before. The house was only a barrier, a temporary wall to keep it contained. But now it is free, and it is not just one force. It is many." I shook my head. "I can create. I can shape." "I can?" The figure held up a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "You are the creator, yes. You can shape this world. But there are forces older than creation itself. Things that were here before even the house, before the land, before the souls. They are not easily tamed, and they do not yield to the same energy you control. They are part of this world. As much as you are now, they cannot simply be molded." The ground beneath us trembled again, this time more violently. The roots of the ancient tree began to crack, breaking through the soil as if the land itself was in pain. I could feel the land shuddering, the dark force below growing stronger. "There must be something," I said, feeling the urgency rise in my chest. "Something I can do." The figure sighed, the sound like the rustling of dead leaves in a storm. "There is one way," it said, its voice almost a whisper. "But it is not a way you would wish to take. The land you created. The tree, the rivers, the cities. They are all bound by the forces you've shaped. But the darkness is bound by something else." "What do you mean?" I asked, though a sinking feeling filled my stomach. The figure glanced at me, its eyes filled with the kind of sorrow that seemed to span ons. "The only way to remove the darkness is to bind it again. Not through force, not through creation, but through something sacrificial." The wind around us picked up, and the ground shifted again, as if the land was warning us of what was to come. The souls that had gathered around us were now standing still, watching in confusion and fear. They, too, could sense the danger. "You must give a part of yourself to the land," the figure continued, its voice barely audible over the rising wind. "You must sacrifice your energy, your essence, your very connection to this world. It will be a binding, an anchor that will hold the darkness in place once again." I felt the breath leave my body. The weight of what the figure was saying began to settle on me. "A sacrifice." "No," I whispered. "I can't. I've just created this world." "I can't?" "The darkness is too great," the figure interrupted gently, its voice filled with a quiet inevitability. "The only way to restore balance is for you to become part of the land itself, become its anchor. Without you, the world will crumble. Without this binding, the darkness will rise again." I turned to face the city, the souls, the land I had created, and for the first time, I understood the weight of what it meant to be the creator. I had brought life into existence. I had freed the souls, given them freedom and purpose. But that freedom came with a cost. The land was my creation, but it was also my responsibility. I felt the pulse of the world beneath me, and for a moment, it felt as though the earth itself was speaking to me, urging me to act. And so, with a heavy heart, I made my decision. I will bind it. I said, my voice steady despite the storm that was brewing around me. I will protect this world. And as I spoke, I felt the energy of the land surge through me, and the roots of the great tree began to extend outward, reaching deep into the earth, pulling me into the soil, into the heart of the world I had created. The binding had begun. As the roots of the great tree began to surge beneath me, extending outward like ancient fingers reaching deep into the earth, I felt the ground beneath my feet pulse with life, yet a strange coldness began to creep into my chest. The soil seemed to absorb my energy, pulling me toward the heart of the world I had created, drawing me into the deep veins of its existence. My connection to this world, once a source of power, now felt like a tether, a binding. I could feel the land itself groaning, the energy I had created shifting, realigning in preparation for the sacrifice I had agreed to. The darkness, the thing that had been contained, imprisoned by the very cycle I had shattered, was awakening, but now it would have to be contained once again. The weight of this responsibility felt heavier with each passing moment. The roots twisted around me, their ancient energy surging through my body, connecting me to the very essence of the land. The heart of the tree, my anchor, began to glow, its light pulsing with rhythm, intertwining with the pulse of my own heartbeat. The tree was alive in ways I had never truly understood before. It was not just a symbol of creation, it was a sustainer, a keeper. The dark tendrils of shadow, now fully awakened, clawed at the edges of the world. I could feel them, like serpents slithering through the air, tugging at the very fabric of existence, trying to tear the land apart. They could feel my presence, my connection, and with each movement, they twisted toward me, seeking to break free, to devour everything I had built. No, I whispered, as I stood firm, my hands still pressed to the tree's trunk, trying to center myself in the depths of the land's pulse. This is my world now. You will not take it from me. But the darkness only grew stronger. The roots dug deeper, pulling me closer to the ground, the earth. I could feel the land pulling on me, as though it was asking for something, a sacrifice. My essence, I realized. I was not just a creator, I was the land's keeper now. My energy would bind the darkness to the earth once more. But to do so, I had to let go of the very connection that had made me its creator. The figure, standing in the distance, was silent, but I could feel its presence, its understanding. It had known this moment would come, the moment where creation could not exist without sacrifice. The binding was not just about the land. It was about me. The power that had once flowed freely through me was now being drained, absorbed by the earth, by the roots that encircled me. My essence was being tethered to the land. A searing pain lanced through my body, unlike anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just physical. It was the pain of becoming the land itself. The very air around me grew heavy, thick with the weight of the power that was being extracted, leaving me weaker, drained, my connection to the world around me deepening and yet fraying at the edges. I could feel the darkness clawing at me, sensing the weakening of my energy, sensing my vulnerability. The ground trembled again as it drew nearer, reaching toward me like a ravenous beast. I focused harder, pulling on every thread of strength, of power that remained inside me, forcing the roots to lock into place, forcing the binding to become real. Stay contained, I commanded through clenched teeth, my voice weak but filled with purpose. But the shadows did not heed my command. Instead, they surged toward me, their tendrils wrapping around my body, around my mind, testing the bond, testing my resolve. And then I saw them, the souls. They appeared before me. their glowing forms flickering like fragile flames in the wind. They were standing in the midst of the city I had created, gathered around the heart of the tree. Their eyes were fixed on me, their faces full of uncertainty. They had witnessed the darkness, felt its presence, and they knew that the world I had given them could be torn apart if I failed. In that moment, I realized they had become part of this world, too. They were not just passive beings to be shaped, they were active participants in the land's growth. Their energy, their will, was a part of the world's balance now. Their hope, their desire for purpose, was tied to my own. I could feel them reaching out to me, their energy pulsing through the roots, joining with mine. They were with me, standing beside me, not just as souls, but as allies. Together, we could withstand the darkness. "We are with you," they whispered, their voices a chorus, soft but growing stronger. The words of the souls echoed through the land, filling me with a surge of strength, a wave of clarity that washed over me like a tide. They had chosen to be a part of this world. They had chosen to live, to grow, to build a future. And they would not let it fall now. The roots tightened around me, pulling me deeper into the earth until I could feel the heartbeat of the land itself, the pulse of creation, of life. The tree's light flared brighter, and the darkness that had been encroaching seemed to hesitate. It recoiled, unsure, unable to fight against the strength of the binding. I gathered all the energy I could, all the essence I had left, and with one final surge, I commanded the roots to take hold. The ground rumbled, the air crackled with the force of it, and the land answered. The darkness writhed as if in pain, its form flickering, dissolving, but it could not escape the binding. The shadows began to shrink, their form receding, retreating into the earth, forced back into the depths where they belonged. For a moment, all was still. The wind died down, the land stopped trembling, and the air became calm once more. I remained kneeling on the ground, my body trembling, my energy spent, but the world around me, our world, was safe. The souls gathered around me, their light bright and pure, their faces filled with gratitude, with understanding. They had witnessed my sacrifice, and they knew what had been done. And as I looked around, at the city beginning to thrive once more, at the land that pulsed with new life, I knew that I had made the right choice. The darkness had been contained, but the world would continue to grow, to evolve, to learn. The cycle was not over. It was merely a new chapter, a beginning. I had created a new world, but now I had to protect it. The land was still, but there was a pulse beneath it, like the beating of a heart. The darkness had been contained, but its presence lingered in the depths of the world. The sacrifice I had made, binding the shadows deep within the earth, had stabilized the balance, for now. But the work was far from done. The souls, who had once wandered aimlessly, had found purpose, and the land was beginning to thrive. The city was no longer just a collection of buildings and rivers. It was a living, breathing entity, growing in harmony with the land and the souls that inhabited it. But the weight of the task ahead was clear. The world I had created, this world, needed to grow, to mature. It needed more than the pulse of creation. It needed to be cultivated, cared for, and protected. I couldn't do it alone. The souls that surrounded me had begun to take on new forms. Some had started building homes, cultivating crops, and growing new life from the soil I had gifted them. Others were teaching, sharing knowledge from their past lives, bringing with them lessons from the world they had left behind. They were finding their place, discovering their purpose, and for the first time, they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. But there was still an emptiness. There was still something missing. The land, though filled with life, was still learning what it meant to be alive. I had been the creator, the guardian, and the protector. But I knew that I could not continue to carry the burden alone. The souls, while growing, needed something more, They needed guidance, a deeper connection to the world, to its essence. And so, I set forth to find it. I walked through the city watching the souls work and build. Their faces were filled with hope, but there was a quiet uncertainty in their eyes. They had found purpose, yes, but they still did not fully understand what this world was or what it could become. They needed something more to believe in, something to anchor them to the very land they had been given. I reached the center of the city, where the great tree still stood, its roots deep in the earth, its branches reaching for the stars. The tree had always been the heart of this world. But now I saw it for what it truly was. The tree was not just a symbol of creation. It was the very essence of the world itself. It was the foundation of everything that had grown here. And it was alive in ways I had never fully realized. I placed my hand against the bark of the tree, feeling the energy pulse through me. It was no longer just the land or the souls that I was connected to. It was the heart of the world, the core of creation itself. I closed my eyes and reached into that energy, into the deep well of power that ran through the roots of the tree. I could feel it, a seed. Deep within the earth, the tree was holding something that had always been there, but had never been fully awakened. It was a seed of creation, a source of life that could transform the world once again. But it was not just a seed, it was many seeds. The seed of wisdom, the seed of purpose, the seed of balance. These were the things the souls needed, the things that the world needed. These were the keys to the future of this place. I breathed deeply, focusing on the energy around me. With a deep sense of intention, I whispered the words that had come to me in that moment, words that felt ancient, timeless, part of the very language of the world. Let these seeds grow. As I spoke, the earth beneath me rumbled. The roots of the tree began to stir, the branches reaching even higher, as if they were grasping for something beyond the sky. And then, from the soil beneath me, small shoots began to emerge. They were not plants. No, these were the seeds of knowledge, of growth. The shoots glowed with a soft light, each one representing a different seed: wisdom, purpose, balance. They sprouted from the earth, intertwining with the tree's roots, spreading outward like a network of life. The light from the shoots rippled through the ground, connecting to the souls around the city, touching them, filling them with a new understanding, a new sense of purpose. The souls gathered around the tree, their faces bright with recognition. They could feel it. They could feel the power of the seeds growing within them. They were awakening to a deeper truth, the truth that they were not just part of this world, they were co-creators of it. Some of the souls reached out to touch the shoots, their hands trembling as the light from the seeds filled them with new energy. They understood now. The world was not something to be shaped by one person alone. It was a collective effort, something to be nurtured and grown together. I stepped back, watching the transformation unfold. The seeds were more than just a source of knowledge. They were a foundation. The souls were no longer lost. They were beginning to understand their place in this world. They were beginning to see that their purpose was not just to live, but to build, to create, to shape this world in a way that was balanced, sustainable, and full of meaning. As the light from the seeds spread throughout the city, I felt something new, a sense of hope. The world had been created, yes, but it was still in its infancy. It had needed guidance, a structure to grow, and now the souls had that structure. They had the foundation to build something greater than themselves. I turned toward the horizon, where the land stretched endlessly. There was still much to be done, many lessons to be learned, but now I could see it clearly. This world was not just a place of creation, it was a place of transformation. The darkness had been contained, yes, but it had also taught us something. It had taught us that creation could not exist without destruction, that growth could not happen without challenge. and the souls had learned from that. The first chapter had ended, but the next was just beginning. The city buzzed with new life. The seeds of creation had taken root, and with them, the souls began to awaken to their roles in this new world. It was as if a veil had lifted from their minds, allowing them to see the world not as passive observers, but as active participants in the ongoing creation of existence. They were builders now, sculptors of their own destinies, and with each passing day, the city began to grow, not just in size, but in spirit. The tree at the heart of the city had become the center of this transformation, its roots spreading far beneath the earth, anchoring the world to its source of creation. Its branches now stretched higher, and its leaves shimmered with the energy of the seeds, each one an embodiment of a new purpose. The city had blossomed around it, a living testament to the potential of the souls in the land, both of which had become intricately entwined. But even as the land thrived, and the souls grew stronger, I could not ignore the lingering sense of unease that tugged at my chest. The balance, though restored, was still delicate. The land had been awakened, but it was also still learning to hold that awakening. The shadows of the past were not so easily erased, and I could feel the remnants of the darkness that had once threatened this world stirring beneath the surface. It was as if the very earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next test, the next challenge. The figure, the guide, appeared beside me once more. Its presence was no longer heavy with sorrow, but there was a quiet wisdom in its gaze. It had watched me, helped me, but now it simply stood by, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. "You've done it," the figure said softly, its voice carrying a deep resonance. "You've awakened the souls, given them purpose, and the land has responded. But this world is still in its infancy, and the forces of creation and destruction are still at play." I nodded, feeling the weight of its words. "I know. It feels as if something is waiting, something beneath the surface, something we haven't seen yet." The figure's expression softened, its eyes reflecting the vastness of time. "The seeds you've planted are strong, but they must grow with care. The forces of fate, of destiny, are woven into the fabric of this world. They are like threads in a loom, pulling the souls, pulling the land, pulling you in different directions. The balance must be maintained, but the future is not certain. The threads of fate are fragile, and they can easily unravel." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The figure's words rang true. The world had been created, but it was still vulnerable. The souls, though awakened, were still learning how to shape their world, and I, as their creator and protector, was still bound to it. The weight of responsibility was heavier than I had ever realized. The figure stepped closer, its form glowing softly. "There are those who will try to disrupt the balance. There are forces beyond this world that will seek to influence the threads of fate, to twist them for their own purposes. They will try to manipulate the souls, to control them. And when that happens, you will face a choice." I turned to face the figure, my heart pounding. "What choice?" The figure's voice was steady, but filled with an unmistakable sense of finality. "You must decide whether to allow the threads of fate to be woven as they will, or whether to take the loom into your own hands. To control fate, to guide it to where it needs to go. But be careful. Control comes at a cost. The threads can be unraveled, and once they are, they cannot be repaired." A chill ran through me. The weight of those words settled on my shoulders. The idea of controlling fate, of guiding the future, was one I hadn't considered before. I had always believed that creation and balance were enough. But now, it seemed, I was being asked to step into a role that went beyond that of a creator and protector. I was being asked to become a master of fate itself. The land around me trembled slightly, as though the very earth was acknowledging the choice that lay before me. The city, the souls, the tree, all of it was tied to the threads of fate. The balance was delicate. And if I were to choose to control it, there would be no going back. I turned my gaze toward the horizon, to the unknown future that lay before us. The world I had created was growing, yes, but there was still so much uncertainty. I could feel it, like a knot in the fabric of existence, something waiting to pull at the threads, to disrupt the flow of life. The figure's voice broke through my thoughts once more. You must decide, Creator. What is it that you will shape? Will you let the threads of fate weave themselves? Or will you take hold of the loom and pull the threads in a new direction? The future is yours to create, but it will not be without its cost. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The energy of the world pulsed around me, alive with potential. The souls were waiting, watching, unsure of what was to come. They had found purpose, but they, too, were at the mercy of the threads of fate. And I had the power to shape it. But would I? A deep breath filled my chest as I realized that the power to control fate, to shape it, was not something I could take lightly. To control the threads meant to control the lives of the souls. To change the course of their journey, it meant playing the hand of fate, manipulating the very fabric of their existence. But perhaps that was the only way to ensure the balance. I raised my hand slowly, feeling the energy of the tree, the land, the souls, all flowing through me. I had shaped this world, and now it was time to decide how I would shape its future. I was not just a creator, I was a weaver, and the loom of fate was mine to command. The loom of fate stretched before me, invisible but undeniable, woven into the very fabric of this world. It pulsed with energy, a living, breathing force, waiting for me to make my decision. I could feel the weight of every thread, every possibility that hung in the air, each one vibrating with potential, with choices yet to be made. The world was still in its infancy, fragile in the wake of the darkness that had once threatened to consume it. The souls were learning, adapting, building. They had found purpose in their freedom, but their understanding of that freedom was still evolving. They were connected to the land, to the very heart of creation, but they were still searching for their place, for meaning beyond the gift of existence. And now, I was being asked to choose whether to let fate take its course or to intervene, to control the very essence of their lives, their futures. The weight of this decision was more than just personal. It was a decision that would shape not just this world, but the essence of life itself. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, feeling the pulse of creation within me. I could feel the souls around me, each one tethered to the land, to the tree, to the energy that connected us all. They were waiting for something, unsure of what their next steps would be. They had been freed from the cycle, yes, but freedom was not always a gift. Sometimes it was a burden. I turned my gaze to the city, the place that had grown around the tree. It was no longer just a cluster of buildings. It was a living entity, shaped by the souls in the land. There was growth here, but it was still young, still learning, and I realized, in that moment, that the world I had created was not just a place. It was an idea. An idea that needed to be nurtured, tended to, protected. The figure beside me was silent, its presence strong but non-invasive. It had guided me, helped me understand the weight of creation. But now, I was standing at the precipice of something far more profound. Something that went beyond simply being the creator. This was the responsibility of control. To shape the future of the souls, to direct the flow of existence. What will you choose? The figure finally asked, its voice carrying the weight of time, of knowledge. It was not a question of what was right or wrong. It was a question of what I would shape the world into. It was a challenge. I could feel the energy of the world around me, the land that had come to life through my will. The souls, though filled with purpose, still lacked direction. They still lacked a clear path. And I realized that perhaps this was the true test, to guide them not by force, but by understanding. They had been freed, but freedom alone was not enough. They needed something to tether them to the land, something to anchor their souls to this new existence. If I chose to control fate, I could shape their futures. I could guide them toward balance, toward growth, toward a future that was both creative and sustainable. But that control would come at a cost: their autonomy, their ability to choose for themselves. If I chose that path, I would become the weaver of their fates, and the threads I pulled would be tied to me, to the land, to the heart of creation. But what would happen if I let the threads unravel naturally? If I allowed the souls to carve their own paths, to live and learn and grow on their own terms? Would they be able to find their place, or would they lose themselves in the chaos of existence? Would the land thrive, or would it fall to ruin under the weight of uncertainty? I stood there, my hand outstretched, feeling the pulse of the world beneath me, the heartbeat of the tree, the land, the souls. They were all connected, and their fates were intertwined with mine. And yet, there was one thing that I knew for certain. The choice was mine. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. My mind began to focus, not on the question of control, but on the question of balance. The souls needed direction, yes, but they also needed freedom. They needed the space to grow, to make mistakes, to shape their own paths. They needed to be guided, but not forced. And as I stood there, feeling the weight of my decision, I realized that the true purpose of creation was not control. It was to nurture, to help the world grow, not by holding it in place, but by giving it the freedom to become something greater. I opened my eyes, feeling the energy of the world surge through me, and for the first time, I understood. The threads of fate were not something to be controlled. They were something to be woven. Each soul, each being, had a place in the tapestry of this world, and it was my job to help them find that place. I stepped forward, my hand reaching toward the loom of fate. The threads shimmered, and with a gentle pull, I began to weave. But instead of forcing the threads into a rigid pattern, I allowed them to move with the flow of the world. I guided them, but I did not force them. The threads of fate began to intertwine, forming a design that was both beautiful and flexible, a tapestry of possibility. The souls began to move, their forms shifting and growing as they embraced their own paths. Some found their way to the city, building new homes, new lives. Others ventured into the land, exploring the vast expanse of the world that had been created. They were free to choose, free to grow, but they were also guided, tethered by the threads that connected them to the land, to the tree, to the very heart of creation. The figure beside me watched in silence, its presence filled with approval. The balance had been restored, not through control, but through understanding. The world was not mine to control, it was mine to nurture, to help grow. And in doing so, I had created something far greater than I could have imagined. The threads of fate had been woven, not by force, but by choice. And as I looked at the world around me, I knew that this was only the beginning. The world had begun to breathe. With each passing day, the city expanded, and the land beyond it flourished. The souls had found their place, working, creating, living. They were no longer passive beings, simply existing in the shadow of the house or the dark forces that had once threatened them. They had a purpose, a vision, and the threads of fate that connected them to the world were woven with care, ensuring they were free to choose to grow and to shape the future of this world. But even as the land grew vibrant with life, there was still something in the air, something that tugged at my thoughts, something I couldn't quite place. I had shaped this world, guided it toward balance, but a whisper lingered, a sense of unfinished business, a feeling that this was only the beginning. The figure, who had watched over me from the moment I had begun this journey, stood beside me once again. Its presence was calm, still as ever, but there was an intensity in its gaze. as if it had seen something that I had not yet noticed. "You've done well," the figure said, its voice low and filled with quiet wisdom. "The world is growing, and the souls are finding their place. But this is only the beginning." I nodded, feeling the weight of its words settle deep within me. "I know," I replied, my voice filled with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "It's just, I can feel it. There's something more that I haven't seen yet. Something waiting." The figure did not speak at first, but then it nodded slowly. "You are right," it said. "There is more to this world than you've realized. There are paths here that you have yet to walk, and not all of them are paved with light." The words struck me, and for the first time, a chill ran through my body. I had thought that the darkness was contained, that the shadows had been defeated, but now the figure was speaking of paths. Paths I had not yet seen. "The threads of fate are woven tightly now, but they are not static," the figure continued. "They shift. They twist. They change. The world is full of possibilities. But with those possibilities come dangers. Forces that are beyond your reach, beyond your understanding." I felt a knot form in my chest. Dangers. What kind of dangers? The figure's eyes darkened, and for a brief moment I saw a flash of something ancient, something heavy in its gaze. "Not all forces in this world are bound by your creation. There are those who seek to unravel what has been woven. They will test the balance you have created." A deep unease settled in my stomach. The figure's words were clear, but their implications were far from reassuring. I had thought that by creating balance, by shaping the world and guiding the souls, I had sealed the future. But now I saw that I had only set it into motion. The forces that had once been trapped, whether dark or hidden, were still there, and they were waiting for the right moment to strike. I turned to the figure, my heart heavy with the weight of what it had said. What should I do? What path should I take? The figure stood still, its form almost blending into the landscape. "You have already taken the first step," it replied, its voice almost a whisper. "You have created, you have woven the threads. But now you must walk the unseen path, the one that lies hidden beneath the surface of what you've created. You must go deeper, deeper." The word echoed in my mind. What did it mean? The world I had built was real, tangible, filled with life, with purpose. But there were depths I had not yet explored, places I had not yet seen. "You will find what you need," the figure said, as if reading my thoughts. "But you must go alone. It is a journey you must take, one that will test the very core of your being." I felt a shiver run through me, but I didn't hesitate. The world I had created was important, yes, but it was more than just a world. It was alive. And if there were forces threatening to unravel it, I would face them. I had no choice. The figure stepped back, allowing me space to move forward. "The unseen path lies beyond the horizon," it said, its voice fading. "Trust yourself. And remember, the balance can always be tested, but it must never be broken." With those final words, the figure vanished, leaving me alone, standing on the edge of the world I had created. I felt the pulse of the land beneath my feet, the hum of creation still alive in the air. But there was a feeling, a pull deep within me, urging me to step beyond what I had built, beyond the city, beyond the souls, beyond the boundaries I had placed. I looked toward the horizon, where the world stretched endlessly before me, and I knew what I had to do. There were paths in this world I had not yet walked, secrets buried deep within the land, hidden beneath the surface of creation. I could feel them calling to me, beckoning me forward. I took the first step. The first step I took felt like an anchor in the unknown. The world around me shifted, as if the very earth beneath my feet was alive, breathing with the energy I had awakened. The city, the center of everything I had created, faded into the distance behind me, but I could still feel the pulse of its life, its growth, its potential. The souls I had freed, the land I had shaped, they were all still connected to me, still tethered to this world I had given life. But this was something different. The further I walked, the quieter it became. The bustling energy of the city, the voices of the souls, began to fade into a distant hum, like a memory that was slowly slipping away. The air grew still heavier, as though I were entering a realm outside of time itself. The path ahead of me wasn't clear, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking exactly where I needed to be. The earth beneath me felt ancient, the ground pulsing with a rhythm that was foreign, primal. It was as though this land had been here long before I had set foot upon it, before the house, before the souls, before creation itself. This was the heart of the world, the source of everything that had ever been. The trees, sparse at first, grew taller and more twisted the further I ventured. Their bark was blackened and scorched, as if they had witnessed centuries of storms and flames. Their branches reached toward the sky like skeletal hands, as if trying to claw their way out of the darkness that surrounded them. The land itself was scarred, marked by the invisible forces that had once ruled this place. I could feel it now, the pull, the weight of something deep beneath the surface. The shadows of the past had not simply disappeared. They had been buried, forgotten, but not gone. This was the place where they had been kept, where they had waited. And now, they were stirring. I pressed on, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. The world I had created, was it truly safe? Could it stand on its own? Or was the darkness still waiting to reclaim it? The figure had warned me that the forces of fate were not always kind. The balance could be tested, could be broken. And if that happened, I wasn't sure what would be left of this world, or if there would even be enough of it to save. The deeper I moved into the land, the thicker the air became, and the more alive the earth seemed. I could hear the faintest whispers, like voices calling out to me from beneath the soil. I could feel the pulse of their energy, old and familiar. These were not just memories, they were echoes. Echoes of a time long forgotten, of a world that had been here before. A world that had been lost. And then, I reached it. The heart of the world, the source of everything. The earth opened before me, and I saw it a vast chasm that stretched deeper than I could see, the edges of the hole cracked and blackened, as though the earth itself had been torn apart. The air around the chasm was thick with an unnatural energy, an aura of ancient power. The darkness was not just present here, it was alive. It moved and twisted, its form flickering in and out of existence, as if it were not bound by the same laws that governed the land I had created. I stepped closer to the edge, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the pull of the chasm, the call of the darkness that had waited here for so long. This was where the balance had been forged, the place where the threads of fate had first been woven, and where they could so easily unravel. The whispers grew louder, clearer now, and I could almost hear them calling my name, beckoning me to come closer. I was the creator, the weaver of fate, but in this place, I felt small, insignificant. The darkness here was ancient, older than anything I had known. It was not something I could control. It was beyond my power. And yet, I had no choice but to face it. I stood at the edge of the chasm, my body trembling, my heart heavy with the weight of the decision I knew I would have to make. This was the root of everything, the heart of the world. The darkness that had been contained was not gone. It was waiting for the right moment to break free, to consume everything once more, and I was the only one who could stop it. But could I? The chasm below me seemed to pulse, its depths unfathomable, and the air around me thickened with a presence that felt like it was staring into my very soul. The power of the darkness was vast, and I could feel it creeping into me, into my thoughts, testing my resolve. It was trying to weaken me, to break me, just as it had once broken this world. I closed my eyes, feeling the energy surge within me, I had created this world. I had shaped it with care, with love, with purpose. But I knew that this wasn't just about creation. It was about protection. The balance I had so carefully woven could be shattered in an instant if I didn't act. I reached out, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath my fingers. I could sense the threads of fate still there, still tangled in the darkness, still waiting to be pulled. And with that realization, I understood what I had to do. I had created this world, but I had to sacrifice something more now. To protect it, to bind it, to hold the balance, I had to give up what remained of myself, the very essence of my being, my connection to this land. Only then could the darkness be truly contained. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The sacrifice would not be easy, but it was the only way. To protect this world, to protect the souls who had found their place here, I would have to give up the one thing that made me whole, the power of creation itself. The chasm beneath me trembled, as if the darkness sensed my decision. The air crackled with energy as I gathered the last of my strength, the final threads of creation. And with a single, powerful thought, I reached out to the core of the world, to the heart of the earth. And I bound it. The earth shook violently, the chasm roaring as the energy surged into the depths, pulling the darkness back, sealing it away. My connection to the land was severed, my essence being drawn into the very roots of the world, the power of creation consumed by the earth. The darkness fought against it, struggling, twisting, but it was too late. The sacrifice had been made. The binding was complete, and in that moment, I understood the world would live on without me. It would continue to grow, to evolve, to thrive. I had created it, yes, but it was not mine to control forever. The threads of fate would continue to weave themselves, but the balance I had established would remain. The land would flourish, and the souls would continue their journey, living with purpose. And I would become part of the land, part of the balance I had fought so hard to protect. The world was still. The great chasm, once a vortex of swirling darkness, now stood silent, its depths sealed by the binding I had placed upon it. The land, once trembling under the weight of the force that had been held captive, now felt different, alive in a way that it had not been before. The trees, the earth, the rivers, all of them seemed to breathe in unison, their pulse steady, calm. But there was an emptiness in the air. I was no longer part of it, not in the way I had once been. My connection to the land, to the souls, had been severed. I had given everything I was, my essence, my power, to the world in an effort to keep it safe, to preserve the balance. The darkness had been contained, but at what cost? As I stood at the edge of the chasm, I could feel the absence of my presence in the world. The land, though thriving, seemed to echo with the silence of my departure. The souls continued to live, to grow, but they no longer felt my touch. The world I had created would continue, but I was no longer there to guide it. I closed my eyes, and in the stillness, I could almost hear it. The faintest hum, a whisper in the wind, a call that resonated deep within me. The voice was familiar, like a forgotten memory that was slowly resurfacing, reminding me of something important. It was soft, but filled with a deep, ancient wisdom. It called to me, drawing me forward. I opened my eyes and turned back toward the city. The souls were still there, moving through the streets, working, living, thriving. They had learned to live in the world I had shaped, and they had begun to carve out their own destinies. The balance had been restored, and yet, a sense of unfinished business lingered in the air. It was as if the world was waiting for something more, waiting for me to understand what was truly required. I took a step forward, feeling the land beneath my feet. The pulse of the earth was faint but steady, like the heartbeat of a newborn creature, fragile yet full of potential. But there was still something I couldn't understand, something I hadn't seen before. The souls had found their place in the world, but they were not the only ones connected to it. I was still a part of it, even if I had given up my essence. My sacrifice had bound me to this world, but it was not as I had expected. I was no longer the creator, but the land still held traces of my presence, my energy. The question was, what was left of me? Could I still help the souls? Could I still guide them? A low hum filled the air. The same sound I had heard when I first made the decision to bind the darkness. It was now clearer, closer, resonating deep within the core of the world. The hum was not just the land. It was something more. A presence, waiting to be recognized. A force beyond what I had understood. And then, I saw it. In the distance. A shadow began to stretch across the horizon. It was not a shadow of darkness, but of something different. A ripple in the air, like a veil being lifted, revealing something beneath it. It was the shape of the land, the form of creation, but there was a sense of movement, of change, like the land itself was evolving in ways I had never imagined. It was then that I understood. I had not truly left. I had not been severed from this world completely. The sacrifice I had made had altered my form, my essence, but I had not disappeared. I had become part of the land, part of the very heartbeat of this world. The energy that flowed through it, the pulse that guided it, was still connected to me. I stepped forward, drawn toward the horizon where the ripple in the air had grown stronger. The souls had sensed it too. They were gathering, standing still, their gazes turned toward the horizon, where the shape of something new was beginning to emerge. It was not a new city, nor a new creation. It was the world itself, changing, evolving in a way I had never anticipated. The city, the land, the souls. They were all connected by a force greater than creation. A force that was beyond my understanding. A force that had always been here, waiting to be recognized. The darkness had been contained, but the land had grown. It had evolved. And now it was ready to move beyond the limitations I had placed upon it. I reached out, my hand trembling as the energy flowed through me, and I felt it. The presence I had been searching for, the force that had been waiting beneath the surface, the heartbeat of the land. It was me, yes. But it was also more than me. It was the land's true essence, the force that had always been connected to creation, to life, to balance. And it was now alive. I took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the world surge through me, through the souls, through the land. The energy swelled, not just from me, but from the very earth itself, from the city, from the souls. We were all connected, woven together by the threads of fate, by the force that had always been here, waiting for us to realize its power. The light from the tree at the heart of the city flickered, its branches stretching toward the sky, and the air seemed to shimmer with the energy of something new. This was not the beginning of the world, but the beginning of its next phase. A world that would no longer be shaped by one creator, but by all of us. The souls, the land, the very essence of creation. It was a shared responsibility now, and in that moment I understood. My role had never been to control the world, but to nurture it, to give it life, to give it purpose. And now, as the world continued to grow and evolve, I would not guide it alone. The souls, too, would shape their futures, and together, we would build something greater than what any of us could have imagined. I turned back to the souls, who were now walking toward the horizon, toward the ripple in the air. They were not afraid. They were not lost. They were ready to embrace the change, ready to move forward, just as I was. And with that, the hum of creation grew louder. The world was not just alive, it was evolving. The horizon stretched out before me, vast and full of potential, glowing with the first light of dawn. The ripple in the air, the force of change that had awakened deep within the land, pulsed steadily, its energy growing stronger with every heartbeat. It was no longer a faint echo, it was alive. The land, the souls, the very essence of creation itself had all come together, intertwined in a symphony of possibility. As I stood at the edge of this vast new beginning, I could feel the unity that had begun to form. The souls, once scattered and uncertain, now walked with purpose, not in the shadow of fear or the weight of unknown futures, but with a shared sense of hope, of direction. The city, the heart of this world, was no longer just a place where they gathered. It was a testament to their growth, to their ability to create and shape their own lives. I turned back to look at the city, its buildings, now standing tall, formed from the very earth that had birthed them. The river that flowed through its center shimmered, its waters reflecting the new light that was beginning to fill the sky. The trees, tall and proud, spread their branches wide, their leaves glowing with a golden hue, as though they too had come alive with the energy of the world. The souls, now united, had begun to shape their own paths, carving out new lives for themselves. The land had been shaped by creation, but it was no longer just my creation, it was ours. The souls, the land, the very fabric of existence, had come together to build something more than I could have imagined. The world was no longer a place of uncertainty, a place where they were lost and wandering. It was a place of unity, of shared purpose. I could feel the pulse of energy around me, the force of creation flowing through every tree, every building, every soul. It was not just life. It was life that had been earned, life that had been built with care, with intention. The threads of fate, once delicate and uncertain, were now strong and unbroken, woven into a tapestry of potential. And yet, I still felt the call. The whisper in the wind that had begun to grow louder, calling me forward. It was the next step. This world had grown, had evolved, and now, it was time for it to reach beyond itself. The souls, the land, and I, all of us were ready for something more. I stepped forward, my heart filled with anticipation. And as I did, the ripple in the air surged toward me. The energy surged within me, its power almost overwhelming, but instead of fear, I felt a sense of peace. The very essence of this world had been transformed into something greater, something that was no longer bound by the limitations of the past. I looked back at the souls who stood together, their eyes filled with understanding. They had come a long way, and now they were ready to take the next step with me, to continue shaping the future of this world together. No longer would they be guided by a single creator. They had become co-creators, part of the land, part of the creation. They were not just living in the world. I realized they were becoming the world. The ripple in the air became a storm, a whirlwind of light and energy that swirled around me. It was no longer just a force of change. It was a force of creation, a final test, a culmination of everything we had worked toward. And then I saw it. A vision of the world, expanding, growing, evolving beyond its current boundaries. The city, the trees, the rivers, all of them stretched beyond the horizon, growing larger, taller, more intricate. The land reached out, not just as a place of life, but as a place of growth. A place where anything was possible. The future was no longer a distant dream. It was here, now, within our grasp. I felt the world breathe, its pulse steady and true. The forces of creation and balance, of life and death, of growth and decay. These were no longer separate. They were intertwined, inseparable. The souls, the land, the very essence of existence had come together to form something that was far greater than I had ever imagined. With a final breath, I stepped forward into the light, embracing the energy of creation. The storm of energy surged around me, and in that moment, I understood. This was not the end of the journey. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would never end. The world would continue to grow, to evolve, to change. And I, though no longer the creator I once was, would always be a part of it. Together, we would continue to shape the world. Together, we would build something that would never be broken. Something that would endure, something that would live and grow forever. As the storm of creation passed, the world before me settled into stillness. And with that stillness came a new understanding. the world was alive. Not just because of what I had created, but because of what we had all become. The dawn of unity had arrived, and with it, a new beginning.